Good evening. I'd like to call to order the City Council meeting of Tuesday, August 14, 2018. And the first item is Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Okay. Albertson, absent. Bueller. Danforth.
Here.
Lallam, absent. Manti, absent. Roby.
Here.
Solom, absent. Thorson, absent. Vilhauer.
Here.
Y, absent. Thank you.
We do not have a quorum, so we'll go through, and if the council wants to make recommendations, they can do so, but we won't be taking any formal action unless we get a quorum after a little while. So the first item on the agenda is public comment period, and if anyone is here who'd like to speak about something not on the agenda, now is the time. Seeing none, we'll move on. The second item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. And, well, we can't take action, so we'll just move on. Thank you. The third item on the agenda is presentation, review, and public input on the mayor's proposed 2019 city budget. Proposed budget book available for review at the City Council office in City Hall. And before we get started, I would like to just say what I've told the department heads is that we have a pretty serious shortfall between what was requested and our projected revenue from the general fund. And so I've made some pretty severe cuts. And the cost of maintaining the status quo is just greater than our revenue projections. That's not a comfortable spot to be in. And I will add, though, I am optimistic about the future potential for sales tax revenue. And sales tax revenue is up about 4% by our projections. So that's good. But we had about $3 million requested above what we have projected for revenue. So I cut greatly across the board, and I did not achieve expenditures to equal revenues. There's still a shortfall in the proposed budget. And this is not unlike previous years where we've done the same and we've come out okay because revenues are generally higher than our projections and expenses are generally lower than what we budgeted. So we're probably okay. There's about $1.2 million difference between the expenditure budget in the general fund is higher than the anticipated revenue. But if trends follow like they always have in the past, we will probably be okay. That being said, I did make drastic cuts in virtually all capital outlay. And so some of those things, I mean, I kept cutting a little bit here and a little bit there, and I was not getting anywhere near where I needed to be. I mean, a $3 million gap is just not comfortable. And I don't think that we would be safe in leaving that in the budget. So I cut it down to where I'm comfortable, and I am confident that we'll be okay. And I do think there might even be a little bit of room for the council to add things back in. And so I have expressed to the various department heads that if there is a very critical need that they just can't live without, and they can't find within the department budget money to cover it, that I think they should bring that to the council's attention, and I'll probably even support it if there's justification. So I just want to make that clear that my proposed budget, there wasn't a lot of time from getting that gap down to where we were in our previous cushions to express that to individuals and let them come and monkey around with it, because there's just, at some point you just have to go with it. And so that's what I've done. And I'm open to suggestions, though. And this is my proposal, and I don't think that the council should feel uncomfortable if there's something they think should be put back, that we will put them back. And I want to add, too, that part of the reason for the discrepancy is the rather large contribution to the Boys and Girls Club, which used to come out of the BBB fund. And I've put it in the general fund because it is an external organization, and I don't think it's a rec center. And therefore, by law, I don't think that it belongs in the BBB budget. So that was several $100,000 that made a difference in the general fund. So with that, I know Kristen wanted to make a few comments before we get started. So, yes, Councilman Vilhauer.
I just want to say a couple things to the group here. I support where you're coming from, Mayor. I think we need to wave a yellow flag, but by the same token, it's not a red flag. We are stable. I'd even say strong. I think a lot of cities would envy the position that we are financially. Unfortunately, our revenue source is something that is so dependent on one or a couple key things, and that even in a good year will grow slowly, whereas expenditures, constantly keep growing. So we got to fight that battle. And this is a year where it's turned over that the expenditure needs are exceeding the revenues. But by the same token, like I say, it's a yellow flag at this point, and looking forward to going through the numbers and seeing what we can do. But hopefully at the end of the day, we're going to have a realistic budget that we're working with. But again, I think we can take assurance that we are in a stable, if not strong, economic situation here in Watertown.
Thank you. Thank you for adding that. That's absolutely true. I don't want anyone to think that because I've made dramatic cuts from the proposed budget that we're in a dire strait situation. We are not. We're fine. It's just that our projected expenditures from requests was quite a bit higher, actually several million higher even than our budget last year. And we don't grow by several $1 million a year. We grow slowly. A couple $100,000 a year is typical growth in our general fund, and we far exceeded that with our requests. So it's more that I had to cut a lot of things over the top, not out of the meat of our organization. So, Kristen.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to start out by saying thank you to the mayor and also all the departments for all your hard work. I know the budget process is very long and it's very time consuming, but it's also very important to the city. And I did want to follow with what the mayor said. The asks this year, they came in high. It was about 12% higher than our budget last year. So when you look through the budget book, if you look on page 8, it kind of gives an idea of what the mayor had to go through and cut. The 12% I speak of is if you look at the 2018 budget compared to the request in 19, that's the 12%. And then with the mayor's proposed budget at 17.5, it's still about a 2.6% increase over expenditures, the budget. And going back and looking kind of 2013 through 2017, which those are our actual numbers where we can see our growth, our revenues only grow between about 1% to 2%. So when we budget, we don't want to budget our expenditures that much higher than what we're really seeing in our growth. The City of Watertown has always been a conservative budget, and I think we want to maintain that. So I think it does look like a lot was cut, but I think this is keeping us right in line with how we've always budgeted. The one thing that I think we're going to try to focus on is with our conservative budgeting on our revenues. When we look at the trend, we do see that we continue to grow in our budget the same way we grow in our actuals. But I think where the city would like to go is I think we want to see, basically our goal is to get the gap between our budget and our actuals a little bit closer. And as we continue to get that closer, I think we'll start to be able to then really look at what our expenditures can be. But we do have kind of a significant gap because of our conservative budgeting. And I think with time, when we get that closer to our actuals, then we'll be able to see our expenditures go up as well. In regards to the meeting, I think we'll have each department come up and speak to their budget. I do want to change a few things just for time. I know that the budget hearings can be very long. I'm requesting that when the departments come up that we're not going to focus so much on the goals, accomplishments, and performance measures. The council and the public has had the opportunity to look through the book, and if the council has any questions regarding it, feel free to ask, but I think for time's sake, we'll kind of skip over that and we will go straight into the budget. I'd ask the departments to take the time to talk about any significant changes or anything in their budget that they feel is important. And I know, as the mayor said, there was some cuts, and those are definitely the ones that you'll want to speak of. Other than that,
Councilman Billhauer?
Chris and I asked you this morning if you could, I think it'd be helpful for us as well as those that might be watching, to just run through, I mean, we generate the bulk of our income from our sales tax, and we have, you know, three different percentages of sales tax. Could you just give us a real quick 30,000-foot overview what those 3 pennies are allowed to be used for relative to financing our city government?
okay. So we have 3 different taxes. Everybody is very aware of our 2% tax, and how that is 1% goes to the general fund. The second penny, as we call it, goes to the Fund 212. That's our capital improvement fund. The first penny of sales tax is used for the general fund, which is basically how I look at it is it's kind of what runs the majority of our general government departments, our public safety, our streets, items like that. So that's what that tax is set aside for. Now, the capital improvement fund second penny tax has some restrictions on it. That was passed by an ordinance, and the only things that can be spent out of the second penny sales tax are purchasing of a fire truck and ambulance, as well as anything considered capital improvements. It's also set aside that it can contribute to the E911 fund, and you will see that that transfer goes out of 212 and into Fund 214, which is the E911 fund. As far as the next part of the sales tax is what we call the BBB tax. That's your tax that you're going to pay when you go to the restaurant, to the bar, to the hotel. And that tax is put into the separate fund. That money is set aside and can only be used to basically fund any type of our recreation programs. That's kind of what it's there for, and that's what we need to utilize it for, is the event center, and then any type of promotion or advertising of the city, as well as the running of your recreational facilities. So, yep.
Excellent. Councilman Danforth?
Kristen, have you looked at the numbers just out of curiosity? I know that obviously one of our aggregate total costs that's very, very significant for us is our cost of employment, so our wages, salaries, benefits. How is that, if we look at that number historically, how is that developing over time in comparison to our other O&M costs and to our revenues? What do we have an idea of what that's doing in comparison?
I haven't actually put those numbers together. With the wages, they're tied to the union contracts, and the last 3 years of the contract, how it's been spelled out is that there will always be a 2% increase, so I can only speak to the last, I suppose, 18, 17, and 16. So no matter what, the wages were going up 2%. Now, if the sales tax came in over 3% in the contract, then it stated that it would be a 2-step increase. That would equate to a 4% increase of wages. I believe that only happened once in the last contract. So to kind of give you That's about as close as I can come to telling you how wages are. It's been a 2%, and I think one time we had a 4.
Well, no, I'm talking about as related to the whole. What's the percentage of personal services
okay.
of the total budget?
Okay, if you actually turn to page 5, that gives us the most significant breakdown. That is the object of expenditures, and that does break it down by our personal services. The other expenditures is your operating, and the capital outlay are the capital requests from the department. So you can see in the general fund, it's $2.7 million is what we spend on our personnel. And then we have 6.3 basically in our operating. Now, I do want to point out, too, that has the $2 million transfer out. Is that kind of what you were looking for?
That's 61% of our general fund is personal services, so that's employees. You see that in the first column, like the first half of the page where it says 10.7 million.
And then the next column over is actually the operating then for all of the general fund departments.
The 6.3 million operating.
So we're about just under 7, or just under 10.7 million.
Mm-hmm.
Just under 10.7 million of a $17 million.
Right. So
Yep.
that's
Budget.
61%, if that's what you were.
Okay. So my next question
Yeah.
with that is, how does that percentage, if we looked over time, is that number, that 61%, is that going at a faster rate upward than the balance of our expenditures and such?
I'd have to look at that, and I can run that for tomorrow night if you'd like to see that.
I think it'd be
growth.
interesting to know, because we have less control over that than we
Yeah.
do some of our other expenditures.
That's
so I
very-
was curious
yeah.
as to see what's happening with our personal services expenses over time
Mm-hmm.
compared to the trend of revenue growth compared to the balance of the budget.
Okay, yeah, I can do that, and I can provide that tomorrow night.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, we'll move into item A, which is the mayor and city council budget. And I will say I budgeted no increase for mayor's salary or for city council reimbursement. I made no change to the expenditures from the 2018 budget. So if anyone wants to make a change to any of the proposed budget items, then go ahead and say so. Otherwise, we'll just move on to the next category. No comments? Okay. We'll move on to the contingency fund, which is the same as last year, and $300,000. Councilman Vilhauer?
I do have a question, and I've asked it before. That is not necessarily just for the general fund. That
No.
covers all of our city funds, even though it's showing up as a general fund expenditure, correct?
That is correct. It is budgeted in the general fund, and it can actually be spread then throughout any of the departments in the general fund as well as the special revenue fund. So it would be able to be transferred budget authority, not dollars, to, say, the park and rec.
All right, moving along. City Attorney Department. Matt, you want to describe that?
Yes, Mayor. I proposed no changes except for there's 3. The computer supplies and software would be for a subscription as a software as a service program called Clio, probably, I guess. It's an attorney office management software. The increase in resource material, last year's budget was basically exactly the amount that we pay for Westlaw, which is the research service that I use, and I added an additional amount there to account for some possible additional resource materials I may need, and the increase in travel expense personnel was as a result of the Stan Fox was a member of what's called the International Municipal Lawyers Association. I rejoined that organization, and they do have 2 conferences every year, and so that's to account for those expenses.
Any comments or questions? Councilman Billhauer?
On page 42, the miscellaneous revenue that was budgeted for 2018, I'm assuming that was the reimbursement when we were sharing with the utility department. That was the reimbursement, or the utility department share of the cost, correct?
That is correct. That was when we were splitting the attorney, and yep.
If you have any ideas or how I could increase revenue in my office, let me know.
All right. Finance Department, Kristen?
Okay, thank you, Mayor. The finance department does look a little high, and I have a couple things that I wanted to go over. The biggest one is under the consultant services. In that is a $50,000 budget. We have not had a wage study since 2001. We've had lots of discussion on it. This would be where they would go in and they would evaluate all of the job descriptions. They'd look at our job classifications, where we have with our grading and stuff. So this would actually be a company that comes in and does that for us. So that is the $50,000 budget for that. The other reason the finance office budget, you'll see it go up and down, and a lot of times that is due to the elections. The finance office runs the elections. So in that is $17,000 that covers the election supplies and the judges. It also increases the payroll a little because we do have a couple people for absentee voting that are here pretty much for 2 weeks. The other thing that I did want to talk about, it doesn't just affect the finance budget, it actually affects all departments' budget. During the personnel policy committee meetings, it was determined by the group that we wanted to look at offering a EAP, and I might ask Matt to kind of help me out. He was kind of, or Audra. Audra might have to step up and help. But the group did want to do an EAP service, and that's a service that we budgeted about $8,000. It's spread out among all the departments based on the number of employees, and it's a service that would provide kind of outside help. I don't know if I want to just say counseling, but any type of thing that is affecting one of our employees' lives outside of work, but yet it's affecting their work. It allows for, I think, 3 sessions that an employee can go to, and it can be anything relating to divorce or just even a manager that's maybe having a stressful situation with an employee. So we did add that in. It's not just here in this budget. When you spread out the $8,000 cost between all the departments, it's pretty minimal, but we think it is a benefit. And then the other thing in my budget that went up that I'd like to point out is just the publication fees. The finance office does all the publications for all the ordinances and the public hearings and all that. So, and the council minutes, which can be fairly long. So.
Any questions or comments? Councilman Billhauer?
Kristen, the wage study that's being done, when will that be done? I guess the reason I'm asking is, will that, because we have contract negotiations coming up this fall that impact our 2019 salaries. So will this be done prior to that?
No.
Okay.
No, this study will actually be.
Oh, this is a 2019.
Yep.
Yeah,
so we would do the study in 19, and then we would have to gather the information that they provided us. Yep.
Anything else? Thank you, Kristen.
Mayor, on that, we typically go 3-year contracts. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
If we're going to start a new contract in 19, why would we not delay this so that it's more relevant when we enter in new contracts?
That's certainly an option. One thing we could do is what's called a wage reopener, where we would enter into new 3-year contracts with all of the unions. but we would have a reopening of negotiations just on just wages next year if the council were to choose to adopt any of the findings of the study. But another option is to wait 3 years and do it then too. That'd be up to you.
Yeah, I mean, it seems, unless we're going to do something with it, other than put it on the shelf for 3 years, it makes no sense to do it in 2019. I'd do it probably in 2021 so that it's ready in 2022 for new contracts. But just food for thought.
I guess that was a question I was trying to ask, and you put it more succinctly because I got my ears mixed up here. But I'm with you on that, Mike.
I think it's long overdue, and I mean, I think the employees like to know they're being treated fairly, and some of them feel that they're not, and then to make them wait another 3 years, I guess it.
Mayor, let me ask a question. Let's say we do it in 2019, and we've got a budget right now that we're struggling to meet. Where do we find the funds to increase wages in 2019?
Probably go to 2020 or 2020.
Well, they wouldn't be increased in 19.
Well, no, Matt said that we could reopen. You could, whatever you call it, do a reopen or...
They would probably
For
actually
2020.
increase in 20.
For 2020.
Right. But still, the question is pertinent.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, where do you find the funds?
Well, whether it's 2020 or 2022, we do expect that there'll be some adjustment and probably a change in the way that we classify individuals, and that will take time. I mean, I don't know how long that'll take, but it might take a year or two after the study's done. But I guess it's a good question to ask. Can't take action tonight, but Audra, do you want to come to the microphone?
Hi. I just want to say that our part of the issue is our wage classification grading system. We have 9 classification grades. We are terribly compressed based on the variety of job families that we have in the city and the depth and skills of knowledge that we have and the variety. 9 classification grades does not correctly compensate individuals. It gets way too compressed, and then you have the unemployment rate as low as it is, plays a factor, so you have people, it ends up being just too tight. So that's one of the reasons why we're looking at the jobs or are proposing to do that. So I just wanted to kind of add the compression in there as one of the reasons why we're looking at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Audra. Audra Hunt, HR Director. Is that your title? Okay. Any further discussion?
I do think too. I mean, if it was put in there, because like I said, it has not been done since 2001. It also is a longer process to do it, and I understand the point of if we're not going to have a new contract until later, do we do it now? I do see the benefit of doing it in 19 with the thought of where are we going to need to move, and it does give us time to work on the movement versus doing it in then the next year having to. So I think it can go either way, and I think whatever the council decides, whether to hold off and do it next year or do it this year.
Councilman Roby?
Yeah, first, that's a good question and a good issue to discuss. My question is, what's the shelf life of the study? Is this thing last, or is it relevant for 3 years, or is a year later it's kind of off the shelf?
5 to 6 years, she said. Standard. We've been kind of delaying some of the performance, or the PAC, what's that stand for? Performance. Anyway, classification of employees, revisiting that. We've been kind of hoping that the study would take care of, there's a backlog of those that need to be done. Positions have changed dramatically. IT is a good example. We didn't even have IT 15 years ago, probably. So, yes.
Well, then, Audra, I'll just ask you, do you think we should go ahead with this? Okay.
She's nodding her head yes. You can't see that. Okay. Other comments? All right. Lost my agenda here. E is contributions to external organizations, and let me talk about the ones that have always been there in the past. Having made such severe cuts to the capital outlay requests in the various different departments, I didn't feel at all comfortable giving any of the external organizations a raise. And so anything we funded last year, I put in there for the same funding request. And the biggest change, though, by far to this category is the Boys and Girls Club has been moved into the external organizations. And we have set aside enough money to cover what we were paying before the remodel, plus a little bit extra. And this includes an allowance for insurance and utilities. And so that ends up being $240,000, which was not previously in the external organizations. That was found in other locations in our budget. And actually the utilities part probably wasn't even broken out for the Boys and Girls Club because we shared the building with them. But this year, we don't. And the Watertown Development Company, $100,000, that was Terex? Yeah. That's for the economic development for our largest employer to assist them in making their big expansion on the east side of town, which will be a great benefit to our community. So are there, I guess there was one request which I did not add money to, and it's the Watertown Initiative to Prevent Sex Trafficking, not because I don't support that, but because I think that we already do support that greatly. It's a very important initiative to prevent sex trafficking, and we have highly trained individuals on our staff which are working around the clock to prevent sex trafficking in our police department. And so I think that the appropriate way for the city to contribute toward preventing sex trafficking is through our police department, and not to assist in funding for billboards and ads and that sort of thing, which is what was requested. Are there any questions or comments? Councilman Danforth?
I want to go to the Boys and Girls Club funding. On one hand, I understand why it's here. On the other hand, how is it that it was able to be under, well, I'm going to start this over. Matt, the use for the BBB tax is spelled out by state statute, correct? Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
How? You keep looking at your shoes. I don't
Well, I was
know.
going to I brought the book.
Oh, okay. How is it that, independent of the fact that our rec center was there before with them, how is it that the 200 and some thousand that we've given historically to them, which is an uncontrolled contribution, right? We just give it to them, they spend it for their operational needs. How did that qualify historically? And why wouldn't that same thing, because the use is the same, the same money we're giving them now is going to be spent in the same manner it has been for 34 years.
Mm-hmm.
how is it differ that necessitates it going under contributions to external organizations versus coming out of the BBB like it was? That's how the Boys and Girls Club was determined to be funded a lot of years ago. Okay, can you explain that? Because I'm struggling with that. I'm not saying that technically it doesn't belong here, but we've been put in a position many mayors and years ago of an agreement, and how is it that just because the rec center isn't there now it needs to get moved to the general fund, which is taking general fund dollars for a different use?
Well, I guess I'll start by saying it's a bit of a gray area in the statute. I would say that the original intent of this statute was not to fund an external organization, regardless of what they did. But it's been interpreted by the Attorney General over the years to be, I guess, more expansive probably than it was originally intended. And so it could probably still remain under the BBB. You could probably get there. But I would say that it's with a, why it's been done that way for so many years, I don't know. I've asked Kristen if she'd talked to our legislative audit about it. It sounds like they've never said anything about it. So it's, it probably could stay there. It seems to me that it's probably more intellectually honest maybe, or more open, more transparent, coming out of the general fund rather than the BBB tax. But
Sure.
This has never been an issue of transparency. It's always in our budget. It's a matter of what our forefathers planned and agreed to spend some of those dollars on, and got us into a long-term agreement that we find ourselves not knowing where we sit with that, correct?
correct. Yeah.
And so I sit there and I look at that and I go, if it hasn't been, certainly the audits of our books, if that hasn't been challenged over all these years, then it must be okay. I would assume that they say it's okay, because the use is exactly the same. Nothing has changed from the Boys and Girls Club standpoint. And I'm not talking about what we do with the agreement. I'm not talking about the funding dollars. I'm talking about where those funds come from. They have historically come from the BBB. My thoughts are to take them out of the BBB and put them into the general fund, especially at a time when we're challenged with revenues and expenses. I think that's inappropriate. I think it's unnecessary, is probably a better word. And it's still transparent. We still have discussions about what we give to the Boys and Girls Club and what we do with that, as we always have. So this really isn't anything in regard to sliding it on the table. This is just a matter of where was it planned to be funded historically, where has it been funded historically, and what's necessitating the change. And if we can't answer those things, then I question why we're moving that over and taking away some of the needs that we have out of our general fund, which is very limited.
Well, I'm not sure if you thought that this was a push by me, but I did not advise this was necessitated. I was asked if it was where it should be. So I think, honestly, it probably could fall under both. I think the BBB, you could probably get by with it. It is a very loosely interpreted statute. And so, but I'm not the one that advocated switching it. So
no, and I'm not pointing that finger at you.
Okay.
I'm really pointing at Kristen.
Okay. Okay.
No, I'm not. But there is a legal application here.
Right.
That's why
right.
I'm
No, I
addressing it with
understand.
you.
I just want to make sure. I didn't say that it can't come out of the BBB. I think it might be a little gray, but I think it can probably. It's another one of those that hasn't been directly addressed in state in courts. So,
Kristen?
Okay. I think the reason for the move is you'll also see another change in the BBB, and it's kind of a change of just perception and doing things, not necessarily that the way it was done is wrong, and not maybe necessarily that the way we're viewing it, and when I say that, the mayor and I are viewing it as right, but what we did is we moved the contribution to the Boys and Girls Club to the external organizations. But on the flip side, what we did do is we had the BBB fund now increase its contribution to our own Park and Rec. If you look at the Park and Rec's revenue, hang on, let me get to it. If you looked on page 13, you would see in the past that the BBB fund has only gave the Park and Rec fund $50,000, and we increased that to $400,000. And as I stated, I don't think what happened in the past was incorrect or the wrong way to do it. I think it's a change of what we kind of wanted it to do. We wanted the BBB fund to show that it is giving to our Park and Rec. It's our facilities that we're running, and that the dollars are coming in from, they're going back to that fund. So
That's exactly right. And I know you can do it lots of different ways. To me, the Boys and Girls Club is an external organization, and the BBB fund is primarily meant to help the Park and Rec, which needs help. We've spent a lot of money building new facilities for Park and Rec, and that BBB fund should be offsetting the increases in costs in the Park and Rec department, and I felt that was really important.
Yeah, we haven't
Councilman Roby?
gotten it, yeah.
I'd like to ask Matt first, read the ordinance, and then I'll comment.
Read the statute. The entire statute? No, no. I'll read the last sentence because that's where the rubber meets the road, I guess. Here, the tax shall be levied for the purpose of land acquisition, architectural fees, construction costs, payments for civic center, auditorium, or athletic facility buildings, including the maintenance, staffing, and operations of such facilities, and the promotion and advertising of the city, its facilities, attractions, and activities.
My comment is there's interpretation, there's gray area, as you pointed out. I'm in favor of this being under external organizations because it is a not-for-profit. I think the gray area in the past was it was attached and shared space with the recreation facility. So I'm guessing, I'm speculating, I wasn't there. That's how they were able to do it with a straight face, for lack of a better phrase, okay? I couldn't do this with a straight face. This is a valuable organization in our community. It's a not-for-profit. I've always struggled, since I've been in the council, why we give tax dollars to not-for-profits. We don't tax people to give money to charities. Now, we have made a decision, and I voted in favor of doing that in cases to assist organizations. But if in this particular case, this is a not-for-profit, it's an external organization. I think that at this point, if we try to put this under the BB&B, I think that's really a stretch. And when I look at something, we're stretching that far. I think we're stretching too far.
Thank you. Councilman Danforth?
We haven't gotten to the Park and Rec budget. I was not aware that there was an offset to that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And with that, I'm fine then.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that.
Right. Well, and we're seeing an increase in our BBB tax, I think, because we've built these recreation facilities, so that's appropriate. Councilman Vilhauer?
So it's a fair statement that had we not increased the subsidy from the BBB to the Park and Rec, we would have had to increase the subsidy from the general fund. So
Right.
To me, it's an offset, and now it's more transparent the way
Right.
we're doing it.
I just, to me, we're calling spades by making this change. All right, thank you. Any other comments about external organizations?
Actually, I do have one, Mayor.
Sure.
Because this came before us a few months ago. The Historical Society, we're leaving that as is, but I see someplace else we are budgeting for some repairs
Yes.
on that building.
Yes.
But this is purely just a subsidy that is being given to the Historical Society. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And the Historical Society occupies a building that the city owns. It's in our interest to maintain that building. And so there's money set aside to make some repairs to the building.
Mayor, I'm going to go back to what Don said. And we've had this discussion every budget I think, since I've been on the council. And that's the logic of giving to these external organizations. And here we are, having that same conversation. And I agree with Don that unless they are a quasi-service to the city of Watertown, which we do have, for example, that if we didn't have some of these, we'd have to provide some of these services. You know, for example, the dive and rescue, for example, they provide a big service. They assist in a lot of things. There's others. But those that don't provide some type of service back to the city that, in essence, we would have to provide, we got to ask ourselves why we are doing that. Because there's 100 other nonprofits out there that could be asking, how do you give to one and not others? And I'm not so sure that what we shouldn't be doing is we shouldn't be giving fair warning that we're going to phase them out over a 3-year period or 4-year period and make a decision, because I don't think it's right that we tax people to give to nonprofits. And like Don, I think Don said it very good today in a discussion he and I had, and that was, you know, the Danforth, we give to those that we believe in, and others give to what they believe in. But we're making that decision with all these people's dollars as to who should get the money and who shouldn't, when it's not truly a quasi department or need of the city of Watertown. And I don't want to have this discussion next year and have the same discussion again. I think we have to decide what makes sense and move on. And like I said, this is my 7th budget or 8th budget, whichever one it is. We've had the discussion every time. Mm-hmm. I just think we need to make that decision, and then we got to give fair warning if that means that we're going to reduce.
Sure, and I can tell you, and I've spoken with other mayors, this is a common issue that communities face because many of them do contribute to external organizations. And what one person sees as a need that the city would be providing if the organization didn't exist, someone else might not see the need for that. And so it's, you know, why do we fund Park and Rec? Is it a necessity for a community? Well, no, not really. But do people want to move to our town if we don't have any parks or recreation? Probably not. I mean, it's critical to our community to have that. That is a city organization, but it falls into a lot of the same types of questions. It isn't essential function like public works or public safety. It just isn't. And I would argue vehemently that it's absolutely critical to our community's well-being, and so it belongs there. And I could see that argument for every one of those. I sat through those interviews, and they're all very important organizations. Are there other organizations that don't get contributions? Yes. I hope they don't come and ask for money, but the pot is shrinking. As time goes on and the money doesn't grow to them, that's a shrinking with inflation. So, we are reducing in that respect. So I think if you want to have that discussion, I mean, go for it.
Mayor, I'd like to interject if I could. I think I kind of understand what your comparison is there to a degree, but that when you use the Park and Rec as an example, I think that's something that's been supported for many, many years and was decided on as a community to support many, many years ago. But I agree with Mike, and we've had these conversations time after time, and I'm just going to. I believe exactly what Mike said. We have chosen to pick some organizations that don't supplement or don't subsidize our efforts in other departments in the community. We've had this several times, that talk, and I guess I thought we had evolved into a different position there, but it doesn't appear that it's changed a lot. And again, you could have 100 more organizations come to us and ask for these funds that arguably you could somehow or another interpret that they would subsidize or supplement what we do
and
in other departments.
Every single one of those organizations does add in some way to the quality of life of our community, and some of them are absolutely critical, like the dive search and rescue, which would be our public safety folks doing that thing if we didn't have this external organization. So some of them are easier to defend than others. Councilman Vilhauer?
Just to follow up, I'm agreeing with what I'm hearing up here from my colleagues. I mean, this is my fourth budget hearing. We've had this conversation every time I've been here. I listen. First of all, I want to commend you for taking the time to sit down with every one of these organizations, Mayor, and listen to them. I've got the highest regard for all these, but there were two comments, I think I relayed them to you in an email, that did disturb me. There were a few organizations that were reluctant to do any kind of fundraising, and that rubbed me a little bit the wrong way, that here they're coming asking for funding from the city, and yet they were not willing to do any fundraising themselves. And secondly, I feel there were probably some organizations that do have some pretty ample funding, pretty deep pockets, some pretty stable, overall funding sources, that again I question a little bit the need for the city to be involved. So I share some of the same concerns, but like those are 2 points that I took a little bit of exception to when listening to your interviews with some of these with the organizations.
Thank you.
Just, Mayor, if I could, just one more quick comment. And this was also a part of our discussions earlier in this regard. We talked about, a lot of these folks that would come to these, they wouldn't bring a budget with them, or they would have reserve funds. And some of them were restricted and some were non-restricted, but I would question certainly every time you do these interviews, first of all, they should have a budget, and if they do have funds available to them that are non-restricted funds.
This year, for the first time ever, I made it mandatory for every single organization asking for money to provide us with a budget. And they did. So everyone complied. Anything else? All right. IT department, Spencer.
Alrighty. So some changes on my budget is the big one is I moved the GovTV from from the City Hall budget over to IT. So it was a little increase, but not too much. I just moved the fund, so it made more sense to me. So you should see that as a negative on the City Hall side. As far as capital, for the general fund departments, is we got a printer, a couple computers for finance, City Hall, that $12,000, that would be, there's the idea is it's called a confidence monitor, is we'd put some form of monitor maybe on the front of the podium here, so that the staff can actually see what's up on the projector. So it'd be an additional monitor as well as an additional input, so that the mayor has an input so it can be broadcasted up on the screen, just like Colin's position there. In addition to that, there's also City Hall cameras for the entrances, for the probably around 8 cameras or so around City Hall. Inside, outside, haven't really tied them down exactly where they'd go, but I know a lot of the entrances for the elevator. As far as IT goes, we got a workstation that we back up every computer that we take off of the network. We take a backup of it. So that's that workstation there that you see. Barracuda is what our spam filter is. Once we moved our emails up to the cloud, we still have an
old Barracuda sitting in-house, and what they're telling me is we should really look to move that up to the cloud, and they'll provide some more uptime, hopefully, as well as simplify some processes we currently have to jump through to get everything working. That also includes the archiving feature of our email system. I'd have to remember. Oh, and the IT software is a training platform for our staff. Is one of the biggest risks we have on our network is our staff. So this is a training platform where essentially we attempt to spam our own people to teach them not to click on bad links. It would be fun. Just kidding. but honestly, that's what it is. It's a fake spam emails to train people.
Councilman Rowe?
Company I used to work for did that. Extremely effective. Very effective.
I've heard that you can gamify is the word. You can turn it into a game so it's not a negative feeling. Oh, you clicked on the bad link. You make a positive. Hey, your team didn't click on the link. So I think that was $2,500 for a 3-year contract. So just to kind of get some training in for the staff. Engineering, building services, and street each have $12,000 put in. That total of $36,000 for what's labeled here as iWorks. It's a public works software. It's probably one of the bigger hits we have for IT this year. It's a kind of the push we're making with almost every department is try to get a software to help them do their job more efficiently. This one would be your work order management. We haven't done a deep dive, but what I found interesting is when I was doing research, I ran across iWorks, and they're like, hey, do you know Ken? I'm like, yeah, I know Ken. He's right upstairs next to me. Oh, I also work with Brandy. Well, everything kind of aligned. They've already been doing their own research for the same product, so it was kind of the need is there. The street department's looking. It would also include fleet maintenance. I should have printed off the list, but it would be our entire public works department would run off this. It would be a huge change from the building permits, how we get requests in from the public, and how we respond to those, and how we report on those requests from start to finish. So that's a pretty big project, something we'd probably start doing a deep dive on this winter here. For the police department, the big ticket item there is all of the car computers. Currently are tough books. We'll be replacing those hopefully. I believe that's around $55,000. It's a big cost. It's the whole mounting system, the computers. They got to be a little more rugged. I accidentally kind of made a joke earlier because I said our tough books are getting tough. Like a lot of the touch screens are going bad, so we can't sign. I can't remember the exact number that we have, but we're currently demoing a computer to see if we'll stick with tough books or with a different brand. So that's 55 of that 1,000. The other 20 is they've got an old analog camera system, so upgrading a few cameras around the PD, as well as they've got their servers are in pretty rough shape, probably around 10 years old without having the notes right in front of me. So virtualizing their servers is the other piece of that pie. The same thing with the ambulance is it's essentially 2 computers and their portion of getting their virtual servers or their servers migrated to a new situation, a new hardware. And forestry, we got there was a request to put in security cameras at the forestry building. So a couple internal, a couple external, and that's what that ESEIND is. And the golf course is the last one on this list here, where we currently have a very dated server. Something needs to be done. There's a lot of things up in the air with the Civic Rec project. Will golf be part of that? Not. It's always kind of a unique situation with golf. So right now, something needs to be done with that server. Either it needs to be taken out or replaced. So that's the dollars to get one computer and a baseline server put in there. Any questions on capital?
I do have one. Regarding the computer replacements, is there a rotation that we go by?
Yeah.
What is how old do they have to be before we rotate a new computer in?
We got a 5-year rotation currently, and we had a lot of catch up to do. So we're at a 5-year, and we do have a number of computers in the city that are, quote, not in rotation. So where we rotate the 5-year-old computers down to them, and then we reuse them until they die, and then we find another old computer and put it in its place, and we keep IT busy that way.
You had mentioned the tough books that the police are using. Is the main reason we're replacing this because of the touchscreen and the signature part of it? Is that what you're saying?
I would say that I wouldn't say the main. Well, I mean they're getting pretty.
Can you get an external a pad that you can sign so you're not using that screen
I think
for that?
around like $200.
Would that make sense in the future to look at something like that? If that's what's causing the issue with these notebooks.
And they're
16 computers.
I'm trying to remember what year we replaced those in. 5 or 6. I think they're 5 years old. It's they're really expensive units too. I mean, a tough book's like $2,500, so it hits hard when they come up due. A 25 baseline, and that doesn't count the mount and the harness. So I get what you're saying. Yeah, we could look at it. I think it's a usability thing at some point too.
Yeah, I mean, if it's something minor like that because of the use of the screen, I mean, it's something to consider if that's causing us to have to replace those things. If they're that expensive, if they still work, I don't know if that 5-year, they're supposed to be tough if we have to have them on a 5-year rotation. Just something to think about.
Councilman Danforth.
I don't want this to sound bad,
Okay.
and I'm hoping that we don't have any criminals watching. But do we really have a security issue at the forestry building that necessitates cameras?
I don't know if I necessarily can speak to it. My understanding is that there's been some issues, but I other than that, I can't speak to that. I think that we can ask Park and Rec that when they get here tomorrow, probably.
I think part of the problem is that they leave and there's nobody there, and when they're doing their work, and it's, it's not like you leave City Hall and it's available to the public with no one in here. So the park department should defend that, not me. But
that's kind of where I'm at. If I could let Wade know that you got the question.
Spencer, I have one more, and I don't mean to try to beat you up here. I just have this question. Server replacement. They have for golf. Where is this server located?
Levi's office.
And we can't put them on a server here.
That could be an option. I guess I need direction on what we're doing with that server.
What does that server cost to replace?
I put $8,000.
Okay, because if we have the capacity and the capability to do that here, it would make sense that we.
It's a unique situation, as you know. Sorry to cut you off.
No,
it's a unique situation where he does his business on it and we do our business. So if we house his business over here, is that okay? It's a unique situation. It's always difficult. So he uses the same server, same software as we do due to our business. He does his point of sale food orders through the same software and server that we use to do our memberships and our portion of the pie over there. So that's what's unique about it, and that's why, in addition to that, is we'd be relying on I think we could probably make it work, but if that connection goes down, I think we're probably okay. They've got a little bit of a lesser connection out there for us, but I think we could get by with having the server hosted here if that's the direction we want to go.
I would certainly suggest you take a good look at that.
Yep.
Thanks.
Councilman Vilhauer?
Spencer, I'm not sure if I should direct this to you or maybe to Lee or Tim back there. I know we've seen some pretty unique things over the years that have qualified for some kind of state or federal grant funding for the police department, fire department. Any of this, by chance, qualify for anything? Has that been considered or looked at?
Most of the grants that are out there are for similar type equipment. This year we put in some monies to replace some radios, $20,000 for Homeland Security. We thought that was a more appropriate use. I'm not sure if computers would fit quite into that or not. We could sort of look into it though.
Bottom line,
I see what you're saying,
it's
though.
something you always consider whenever you look at replacing
absolutely.
something. So.
Yep. It's echoey.
Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you, Spencer.
Thank you.
Next is City Hall, and I'll take a whack at that. And Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong. Not very many changes in that. We did see a decrease in the equipment maintenance was just moved over to the IT budget. And we pay 60% of the salary for the maintenance person out of the City Hall budget, and the other 40 comes out of auditorium funds. Yeah. Okay. Anything I missed? Any questions?
How's that working?
I think it's working great. Our maintenance here is awesome. She does a great job. All right. Next is engineering. Colin.
I don't have too much to add here. We don't have too many added expenses. One was obviously the salary went up for the city engineer. That's where a lot of this cost comes from. As far as the computer supplies and software, we've had some people request sit-to-stand desks or other computer software, so that was kind of one of those budget items that we were trying to include, and that would also include anything else that they were hoping for on their computers. I know IT is handling our software for us. Bluebeam was listed. That's PDF software that is beneficial, I guess. I'll say for the engineering staff, I've used it in the past. It's more compatible with CAD software, so I think it's going to be good going forward. I guess that's where we sit.
All right. You didn't ask for any capital outlay, so you didn't receive any pain when I slashed it from 0 to 0.
I would like to say I knew that was coming, but
Okay, thanks, Colin. Any questions or comments about engineering budget? All right, next is police department. Lee?
Are we still short a quorum?
Yes.
I was going to ask for a lot of money. All right. I'll go through this with you, and if you have questions, please ask. We'll start with the police department budget. I also have 911 and animal control as well.
You just need to put a little closer to the microphone.
Blare them out of the seats. It's kind of awkward right in front of you. Okay. So on page 58, we've got the police department budget summary. You can see the personnel services. That was adjusted by finance. Travel expense, there's an increase there of $8,000. We actually scratched that. We had some training that we thought we were going to host next year. It's actually this year. So I've made it known to Kristen and the mayor that we're going to take that out of there. so there'll be no net increase in our travel expense. Computer maintenance, small increase there for actual maintenance costs. Equipment maintenance, you'll see there's a plus of 17,000. Actually, there's some grants that take care of that. We have 3 grants. We have $11,000 grant that we're going to purchase some radars for the cars with, and another speed trailer radar unit. We also have $20,000 that we budgeted for portable radios. So actually, that line decreased by $1,000 if you look at it that way. And insurance premiums, of course, that's just the cost of doing business, I guess. So nothing there we increased. Capital purchases, big question mark there. When we saw that came out with a 0, it caught us off guard. We were kind of expecting maybe some cuts, but not to lose everything. So I just want to kind of go through those step by step with council and just get some input on their thoughts. We had in our CIP 3 patrol cars to replace next year. We would like to see 1 at a minimum. We've got a car that's going to be over 100,000 by next year, and if we wait another year, it'll be at around 130,000 miles. There's full warranty on those vehicles for engine and transmission up to 100,000. So if we do have an engine or a transmission go out, those are quite expensive repair bills. So we would like to see that. At least 1 car put back in, possibly 2 if we could find the money. The other one's going to be over 100,000 at some point next year, and then the following year to be more over. Those cars that we take out of patrol, we do hand down to other departments, or we use them within the police department as a travel car or a command staff car to get us around town when we're going out to meetings and certain things like that. So I would like to see, I know we can't vote tonight or talk about that, but I would like to see council consider that, adding 1 car back in for sure to the tune of $33,305. That covers the cost of the car, which is actually an SUV, and some of the equipment. And then for discussion tonight, we had wanted to replace 4 of our AED units that we have in the cars. Those are external defibrillators. We've saved 3 or 4 lives that we know documented, and we've used them other times on individuals in town. We get there typically before fire and rescue because we're out moving around the town. And we hook those up, and they actually use our pads once they get there and hook them up to their machine if we've already got them hooked up. So those are going to be 6 years old next year. If we push them back another year, it'll be 7. Well, in next year's, in 2020's budget, we're going to replace 4 more that year. So those 4 would either go back, or we'd compound that from 6,000 to 12,000. So
what line item is that?
Kind of a catch-22 there.
What's that called?
Kristen, patrol equipment. Okay.
Oh, patrol equipment. And what would the amount be if we put that back?
4 AEDs is $6,000. Other things we had in our budget, we had 4 patrol rifles. They're about 14 years old. We're okay if we push them back a year. They're a 10-year replacement cycle, but they're functioning fine now. We're okay if we push them back a year, but next year we've got other things in our budget. Or I should say, I keep saying next year, I mean 2020. So in 2020's budget, we were looking at about $200,000 worth of items that year too. So if we push things back, everything kind of slides back. So the rifles we're okay with moving them back. We had some digital portable radios, 13 of them. That's the ones that the officers wear on their hip. They're about $33,000 for 13 of them. We're actually going to get 8 of those through a grant this year, so we're okay if we push them back. Those all do need to be replaced by the year 2023, so we've been trying to do a few a year instead of doing them all at once. And then there was a couple of software things for our accident crime scene investigation team that we were looking to replace for $3,000 and $3,300. We're okay pushing those back a year. And then we also had 5 shotguns that are 1997 models, and we use them as our less lethal beanbag round shotguns. Those can certainly wait another year as well. So in the overall part of the budget as far as the CIP goes, we would like to see the 1 car in the consideration for the 4 AEDs put back in. So again, the car is $33,305, and the 4 AEDs would be $6,000. Any questions on that?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay.
Oh, Councilman Roby?
I understand the rotation methodology you guys are working on. The AEDs, what is the shelf life of those? Do they not? I mean, if they don't work, they don't work, or they don't work very well, and that's kind of a
Yeah, they recommend a 5-year replacement just because of the technology. Also, the batteries, you can replace the batteries in them, and we have done that. We've got a better battery life out of them since we went to the SUVs because they're inside the car or inside the SUV all day and all night. And when they were in the trunks of cars, they were out in the different temperatures. So we've been getting better battery life, but we can replace the batteries. It's just the technology with inside of it, the circuit boards and stuff. They say about 5 years. And we've had some 6 or 7 years as well. We've got a couple over there that we have just around the office that are 6 or 7 years old. I guess I'm not as valuable.
Lee, did you say, are those in all the patrol cars? Is
They
there
are.
one? Oh.
We have 11 marked cars, and they all have
That's
one
good to
of them.
know.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, lives have been saved.
Yes, they have.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anything else?
So with the police department, also in the personnel side of things, this year we had requested to replace to add 2 patrol positions. We came up with a justification. There's a lot of things that went into the justification. My assistant chief, Tim Toomey, helped me with this immensely, and he can certainly come forward if you have any questions I can't answer. But some of the things we talked about, why we need to grow our force. There's stats out there. The FBI says you should have 2.4 per 1,000 residents. The International Association of Chief Police says you should have 2 per 1,000. But what it really boils down to is what's going on within our community and what number is adequate for Watertown. We looked around to see what other cities had. In Watertown, we're currently at about 1.6 officer per 1,000. Huron is 1.9, Yankton is 1.9, Vermilion is 1.8, Aberdeen is 1.7. If we were to add 2, like I request, we'd be at 1.7. So numbers, what are they going to be doing? They're going to be combating and increasing their work with a drug problem and associated crime. We hope to keep them engaged and active, being proactive. A lot of times, police department, we're reactive. We'd like to be more proactive. We get a lot of complaints about speeds, stop sign issues, different things within the community, and it's hard to us to be as proactive as we'd like to be because a lot of times the officers are going from call to call. And just because you clear a call doesn't mean it's done. You still got to do a report, so you got to sit somewhere and type out the report. And then eventually it has to be checked by a supervisor, and then it comes back with some things to fix, and then you end up going to court. So it's more than just going to a call and clearing and you're done. If we could add staff, it would help us to do some more training. We feel that training is very important, but right now we have to deny training because officers, we need to maintain our staffing on the streets. So an officer might say, hey, there's a great training out in Pier. It's free. You just got to get there, pay the gas. We look at the shift. We can't go down to 3 officers. We refuse to go down to less than 4 officers at any time. And so we have to deny the training unless somebody else is willing to step up and cover that. We have had some of our command staff captains fill a shift. We've had some of our detectives fill a shift. They've all got duties that they need to do as well. So just another thing I thought I'd throw in there just so you understand that. On the average, at the police department, we respond to about 22,000 calls a year, which is about 61 calls a day. Typically, a patrol has, if they're full staffed, 6 people on duty, a sergeant, a corporal, and 4 officers. But we end up being shorthanded quite often because of some turnover. We've lost a couple employees in the last couple of years. We've had other years where we'd lose 2 or 3 in a year. There's sick issues. There's injury issues. We currently have an officer out on injury now that's been out for 8 weeks, and it's looking to be extended. We've had a couple military deployments. I've been before council asking to backfill some of those too. So right now we're down about 3. We had an officer leave. We're filling that spot. We had an officer leave before that we're still training that person. And then we've got the injured officer. So we're down 3 officers right now on the street. So it makes things a little tougher. I've been before council before and mentioned how our drug stats are going. In 2017, we had a 48% increase over 2016 from drug arrests. A big thing that we need to do as a police department is be involved within the community. So there's a lot of committees, boards, service clubs, and other things that we do as officers. Some examples of some things that we also do is we do the REACH program, which is for child abuse and families. We have an officer dedicated to that once a week, and he does things outside of that one day as well to finish up those cases. We're actively involved with DARE in the schools, teaching the children in the 5th grade not to use drugs. You have to be proactive. County County Drug Court, we have an officer that's dedicated to that one day a week pretty much, and he does follow-up throughout the week as well. And so those are all things that these officers are doing. So one of the things I pointed out in my justification was that I intend, and I have, dropped one position from our records bureau. We had a records supervisor and 2 records personnel. When one of our records personnel retired, I didn't replace that position. A lot of the stuff that the officers are doing now is more computerized, so it's not as much work in the records division for them. So I met with the staff in there, and they could assume all the duties with the 2 of them. So that's what we've been doing since then. A record starts at about $31,000 for a grade 2 position. An officer starts at about $40,000 for a grade 5 position. So that's about roughly a $10,000 difference. I know there's a couple other things you need to factor in, health insurance and all those type of things. So a new patrol officer typically with all the benefits is in that $60,000 to $61,000 range. I didn't figure out what a records clerk is, but I think really the only difference would be in retirement. The officer pays 8%, the city matches at 8%. Records clerk is at 6%, Kristen. So I think that's basically the only difference. And Kristen can correct me if I'm wrong.
When I looked at it, if we would compare a new patrol officer to a new records clerk, how we budget a new position is obviously the step 1 start, and then with the health insurance and stuff, it would be about a $25,000 a year difference, and that's just taking into account the wages and the benefits. So,
and I don't know exactly how you came to that $25,000, but really the only difference would be the retirement, wasn't it? Or
The wage is higher for a
the
beginner.
wage is $9,000 higher, yeah.
But that's a bargain. I mean, when you look at a new patrol officer,
Right.
just from scratch would be 75 or
60,000,
something.
yep. About 62.
62,000.
So I guess my ask is, I would really like to have 2 officers. I dedicate them to the night shift where they're typically running low. I would dedicate those guys to night shift. If we can get to full staff and remain there, I would be able to allow some more flexibility to our canine officers to work the drugs a little more. Right now, they mix in with the calls when they need to, and which is quite often, so they're not able to get out there and work them dogs as much as we'd like them to, although we're still finding drugs for sure. You can see by our reports going up. So if we could get for sure the 1 position, I eliminated 1, so the net difference is, according to Kristen's, about $25,000. So if that is what it is, and then the new officer would be 62, so basically around 80. Well, you can do the math.
I guess the way I would look at it is, it's great that we look at the difference, but what the counts would be approving then with this is you would be looking at basically adding for just the personnel. If Chief McPeak is asking for the 2, you'd be adding the 120 basically into the personnel. So
I think the record still is in there, though, isn't it? No. Because you still show it in the front pages, 2 records.
Yeah, and it shouldn't have been on the front
Okay.
page, but the salary is not in the budget. That was
in 19's current budget.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes. So that's why I said you're correct in stating the difference, but the records clerk was not in the budget, so you would be
Okay.
doing the full.
I thought it was
Yep.
'cause of that first
No,
page.
I know. I think we messed up on
Okay.
the number of them.
So I'd sure answer any questions you would have about that.
Any comments, questions? All right, you want to move into E9? Oh, Councilman Joe Power?
Procedurally, I mean, I'm not ready to just let this lie. I mean, procedurally, what can we do, or when would we do it?
You would do it tonight if there
Yeah.
were a quorum.
Well, you could.
But we don't
You
have.
can't.
Matt
So
and I-
take it up.
Matt and I have discussed it, and this is a budget hearing, and with there not being a quorum, I would still at this point take your recommendation. This is not a time where, even with your vote, it's still a recommendation. This comes back to a public hearing. Or not a public hearing, but it's an ordinance. So there's 2 more readings that come forward with the final numbers. So this is the time, even though it's not a vote, to state what you would like to see, and then that gives the finance office the opportunity to make those changes. Correct, Matt?
Yeah, correct. So even if there was a quorum and there was a vote on something tonight to change a budget number, that whole budget comes back again and has a first and second reading like an order. So that's the actual appropriation. a vote tonight, even if there was a quorum, is just to change that number.
Okay. Councilman Roby?
Pertinent to this, but other things we're going to see, and Mike and I had a conversation earlier, and this was part of it, is, you know, we had pushed the departments to get more on a rotational basis with equipment, so we don't get hit with big budget hits in one year, reliability, maintenance, and all that. I understand, you know, things are tight, and we're tightening things up there, but for this and other departments we're going to run into here, maybe we ought to have a discussion on that, because this is not the first one we're going to run up where we're kind of hiccuping the rotational strategy, if you will.
Mayor, can I just make a
Councilman
comment?
Danforth?
From my perspective, it'd be really easy for me to take Lee's request and say, yep. But Lee's the first one in line.
Right.
I don't know what's coming next tonight, and I don't know what's coming tomorrow. It's almost like we have to take those things that truly are being fought for to get back into the budget, aggregate them so that we can see what the whole picture looks like, and then act on those based on priority and need. It's hard to take, otherwise I'm going to say, yep, and then all of a sudden the fire department's in here, and I go, oh, God, I didn't know that.
Care about the fire department?
I know.
He's not here.
Well, and as long as you get more blood, that's all you care about.
Right.
But I would like to see us aggregate those requests, and then at the tail end of tomorrow or whatever it is, then see what fits.
But keep in mind that whole rotational thing we kind of pushed everybody to do. So let's think about it. When we had pushed, 2 or 3 years ago to get people to think rotationally, and I understand a tight budget where we're going to have to pull back on some stuff, but when we aggregate it, I think we can make a better decision, because I agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't disagree. I mean, I hated making those cuts. I really did. And to try, and I cut and cut and cut, and I just wasn't there, and I wasn't there. How to pick and choose amongst all the different departments who are all saying this is a critical need. Right. You know, I do think there's a little bit of give, but have to be able to clearly demonstrate that. So appreciate that. Councilman Villar.
I agree too. I think we need to look at least some of the bigger departments. So if I'm hearing right, we're looking at what, about 160,000 between the two positions, a car, and the AEDs. Is that what I'm coming up with? Rough math. Okay.
Chief, just to paraphrase, just so I'm clear, like Glenn just said, it's 4 AEDs you're looking for replacement. You would like to put one car in the rotation, one new car for 33,000, and then two new officers.
2 officers. Yep.
Anyone else? Okay, let's go ahead and move on to E911.
Okay, with E911, we've got on page 61 here, significant changes. Personnel, just your normal adjustment and health benefits. Computer maintenance, we've got some actual costs there. That's minimal increase in those contracts. And some office supplies, we actually decreased that by 1,000 because we hadn't spent it all in the last couple of years, so we decreased that. And then travel expense, we kind of offset that office supplies so we could put a little more in our personnel, because we've got 11 full-time dispatchers now and 4 part-timers, and we need to get them trained as best as we can. And we do a lot of online training, we do a lot of in-house training, but we also need to send them off to some events. We've had an APCO conference in North Dakota, and they host it in Sioux Falls South Dakota every other year. It goes to North Dakota. And there's also a national NENA that we've sent some dispatchers to in the past, and that they come back with great training and they share it with the rest of the staff. So we thought with 15 employees, we needed to adjust that accordingly to get those all trained as best as we can. And then with the capital purchases, we are needing to replace 4 computers. And if you have questions about those computers, I'm sure Spencer can help you out with them, but it's the ones in dispatch. They're on 24/7, and they're always on, always being used. Computers and equipment also has a list there for $21,000 for radio base stations, and what those are is the radios that the dispatchers key up to talk to the Highway Patrol, the Watertown Police Department, the County Sheriff's Office, There's a set of, I think it's four radios there. I'll have to look here, make sure. But they're digital, actually I think it's 7. Oh, that's the wrong one. It's a problem when you have 3 budgets, you gotta keep it separated. There we go. Yes, it is. It's 7 digital base radio stations for $21,000. So that's what we had for capital purchases in that line. Other than that, we got our budget trimmed pretty well there, I think. Any questions?
Yeah, I didn't make any cuts out of the E911.
Lee-
Councilman Vilhauer?
I've got a question on the revenue side. Why other financing sources is going down the last couple of years? 350, 2017, 325, 18, 300 for 19. What's going on there? And I guess a follow-up then, did we ever get our final 5% or whatever we were requesting from the county? Where are we at in that? So I guess I got 2 questions there.
Well, the first one's the easy one. All counties are at 100% of their surcharge collected right now. All counties, Cottington and all of them. So they're all passing through 100% of their surcharge to the city. Yes. Okay. Yep. The reason the numbers are fluctuating is because the first year when it went to this new system, the state estimated some of the costs we'd get, and they fell short of those estimates. And every year we tweak it. Cell phone lines, they go up and down throughout the course of a year. And the numbers that we reported this year are the actual numbers reported by all the PSAPs that contract with us. That's the actual amount they get. So this should be about as close as you can get it. Next year's will be a little bit different if some cell phones add or some drop off. So that's kind of how that works.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilman Danforth?
So, Kristen or Chief, what's the actual subsidy amount that we are now subsidizing the E911?
The current, you're referring to the transfers. Yep. Okay. So for 19, we're budgeting the general fund will give them 50,000. That's a decrease from last year. And then we are continuing, which we've held pretty steady. The transfer in from the capital improvement fund is 250,000. So the total for this year will be a 300,000 transfer in.
And it was 350 the prior 2 years, right, Kristen?
Yep. Actually 16 was 250, and then in 17 we jumped up to 350, 325, and we're back down now to 300. So.
And last year, I think, I'm sorry, correct me if I'm wrong, Kristen, but we were actually able to put money back in the reserve fund for the first time in a couple of years, so that was kind of nice.
So that's at least leveled off. I mean, I remember when I first came on, we were in the $168,000 range, and then it just ballooned on us, and so it looks like it's leveled off, at least from that standpoint. Okay.
Yep. Good question.
All right. Anything else? Move into animal control. Item K.
Okay, animal control, that should be pretty straightforward. There's no capital request for 2019, and the only adjustments would be personnel, and we did add $1,000 for travel, or no, we decreased the travel $1,000 to try and offset some of those costs.
Any questions? All right. Thanks, Lee.
All right. Thank you. Have a great rest of your night.
Item L is Street Department. So Rob Bainan.
Good evening, everyone. That's a tough act to follow right there. All right. I'll try to keep this short and sweet because I know there's a lot to go through tonight for you guys. Really, as far as our budget goes this year, there's been a few adjustments as far as rent machinery and equipment. We reduced that by $3,000. We're actually, from year to year, that varies with our hauling millings and that type of thing, our citywide cleanup. So we reduced that by 3,000. We do expect a higher cost with fuel, so we actually, in our street department budget and our snow budget, which we'll get to that next, but I did ask for $5,000 more in our fuel budget. Parts for equipment, because we haven't had as many breakdowns. We reduced that by 5,000. And of course, you'll see at the bottom, natural gas we reduced by 1,000. We turn the heater off a little bit more often. So, I know the mayor and Kristen and council, you guys have some tough decisions to make ahead. There is a couple things that I did ask for, and I understand that we have to make some pretty big cuts, and with street, some of the biggest cuts, they're expensive machines. So I understand it's hard to spend $300,000 for a piece of machinery. But just so you guys know where things are standing, we did get a new street sweeper that's replacing one of ours. We got that several months ago. It's been great. That one's that it's replacing is going on a city auction. Our second street sweeper that we'd be looking at replacing is an 06. The hours and the miles I don't have in front of me on that. I failed to grab those today. But we do have a lot of trouble with that street sweeper. We generally, in the spring, will run 3 street sweepers, and then throughout the summer we try to keep 2 going. So we did have a request for that, which was $285K. The pickup, $38,000. We're looking at a crew cab pickup. Our newest pickup is an 09, and all of our pickups, actually, we're getting rid of 2 of them on the auction. One of them, just the transmission went out of it about 3 weeks ago. We still have enough pickups, but we limp along when it comes to that stuff. The reason we're looking at a crew cab is there's quite often we have 3 of our patch crew members that will get in a truck, and right now we have an extended cab pickup for the patch crew. It looks pretty funny when you put a 275-pound guy in the back seat of that truck. It's tough. I've been in the back, and I have to sit sideways to get in there, but that's something that we've asked for in the past. We haven't really pushed that, but the tractor side more I asked for. That's fine if we push that off. We've been getting by. So the only other thing that's pretty important to us is we're asking for $5,500 for a generator. And what that generator is, we have one right now, and it's a backup for some of our lights in town. If we have an intersection go down, some of them are on battery backups right now. If we have an intersection go down, we can run down there with our generator, plug in, and have it up and going right away. So when we have an outage, that's what we would use that for. And then I did ask for, it's kind of the same thing with police too, everybody's needing help and stuff, but if we do move forward and get I've asked for 1 full-time worker. I'm continuing to try to grow our department to take care of more of the needs that the city has, and what I'm trying to do is get 2 full patch crews. I've been working on it since I got here. So that was the other thing. I don't have the dollars in front of us right now for what that would cost, but that's a grade 4 position. I know we'd be $58,000. So that's where we're at. But really, you guys got to make cuts. I understand it. It is what it is. We'll get by with what we have if that's the case. So
I will say I get complaints about street maintenance more than anything else, and I hate to make cuts from the street department. If this would be one I could easily change my mind on, because I know we can desperately use a second patch crew. We're still patching. I mean, we're filling potholes still. We haven't made it around the city, and it's August. If we had 2 crews, we could fill the potholes, and the rest of the patching could just be the other repairs caused by construction and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, that's been one of the biggest needs that we've had since I've been there. That I've found the street department needs, and we need to have 2 patch crews. One 3-man crew is just not enough.
Mayor.
Councilman Bueller?
Rob, I know we talked about this before. We've talked about this in the past, and I think there was a real good reason for not doing it, but I don't remember what it was. And that is to outsource some of that patchwork. Is that at all feasible, or is it just so darn expensive that
It's we actually do have a price through Dunnick's for patching, and they patch for us as well. And on our projects too, our mill and overlay projects, they patch for us on that too. And we like in South Lake Drive right now, we're out there working. We do have our crews doing some milling on some of the stuff we do, like manhole adjustments and water valve adjustments. And this year in our project, we actually do have a bid item for patching on that project. And Dunnick's has went ahead and done some patching ahead of that. But we also I do hire them on the side when they're looking for some extra work, which isn't very often because they're so far behind most of the time. I do hire them to do some patching for us. That's the only other place in town. Lang really doesn't do that anymore. I mean, they do parking lot, crack sealing, and surface sealing. That's pretty much what they do. I have seen them probably a couple times in the last few years doing small patches, but so it's just hard to find people to do that.
have we advertised at all, or
I haven't
looked for bids for that type of work?
I have not. No.
Okay.
Councilman Danforth?
What do you do with these people in the off season then? If you're manning for a patch crew, what do they do come the non-patching season?
Everybody that's on our staff, anytime we have snow, is removing snow. But when there's not snow, such as early winter, we have plenty of maintenance in-house in our shop that we do because we have so much equipment. We do a lot of maintenance, but since we've gotten hot box just recently, we'll be able to patch during the winter doing cold patch, which you actually put it in the hot box, heat it up, and it's pliable enough that you can work with it. So we will be doing wintertime patching.
Yeah. Another question I have is, we don't do any seal coating, right? Is that all contracted out?
We farm that out, yeah.
Okay. Have we ever looked at the feasibility of bringing that in-house? We are so subject to basically our one supplier, right? That's where, Mayor, we're getting into a lot of trouble, is we don't have enough capacity when we want it and need it, and that's within our control to get the work done. And the reason why I ask this is I travel out west quite a bit, and the county does all their county seal coat, where they put the oil down and put the rock over the top, and I mean they sit there and over a course of literally a day or two, they do a mile or two at a time, and it's just, is there a possibility that we should be looking at that not only for quality of service and timing, but where would our cost be if we were to do that?
We have worked with the county on some smaller projects over the years as far as having them assist us with some seal coating. They do have the equipment to seal coat and crack seal. They do farm out all their asphalt work. They don't even actually do any patching themselves, asphalt patching. Now, if we were to take on something like that, we would be pulling people off of other duties to actually do that. And currently, besides patching, we do mowing. We have 3, sometimes 4 people mowing. We spray, I don't know how many acres. I've never actually figured out how many acres we do, but we pretty much spray, especially in the fall. The streets, you see grass growing, weeds growing in the streets, we spray that stuff. But we do have guys spraying. We have one guy on a blade all the time. We try to keep 2 guys in street sweepers. By the time we go through our crew, we're always shorthanded. So we could potentially do that in-house. It comes down to where do you pull the staff from.
Does it really come down what your potential cost savings would be of bringing it in-house versus contracting it?
We could figure that out. The equipment, as far as the equipment goes, you have to have the machine to lay down the chips and a distributor, which really I don't think either one of those pieces of equipment used would be too costly. The street department in the past has done some crack sealing in-house. They generally would not route the cracks, which I don't agree that's the right way to do it. The right way to do it is to route the cracks. So having the right equipment for that, the melter where you put the sealer into the melter and put it down, they're quite expensive. The county just got a new one. I forget what they spent on that. I want to guess around $60,000. But they actually, in the winter when it's slow, they do that. And that is something I've thought about. The crack sealing, I think in-house would be a good thing for us to do because in the winter we could do that. The chip sealing is during the heat of the year, and we're really busy.
You need to add staff to be able to do
that. Yeah,
chip sealing.
I could see where it'd be an advantage if we crack sealed.
Mm-hmm.
Chip sealing, we've really backed our amount of chip sealing down because we have so many. We're caught up with the seal coating for the most part. I think last year I spent $119,000 on chip sealing. This year I think I'm slated to spend $160, right in there I think. So we've backed that down from what used to be when I first got there, about $280,000. But we've really caught up on a lot of that. Now we're focusing more on, we need more mill and overlay. There's more of a need for that type of thing. And especially with the IMS, the pavement management study, it really shows where we're lacking, and it's showing more of the mill and overlays than it is the chip seal.
That's the expensive stuff.
The expensive stuff, yeah.
Councilman Bueller?
Rob, do we co-op at all with the county on equipment use, or can we do short-term leases or rent or work with them in any way?
Absolutely. We did last year, for example, I had the county do a bunch of shouldering for us with, we share materials, millings, sand salt mix, that type of thing. They actually spent, I want to say it was 5 days with their crews, their equipment. The only thing we had was one blade following behind, actually smoothing the shouldering areas out and then wheel packing it. They helped us out with that because they have the equipment to do it. We don't have the right equipment for shouldering, so we help them out with that. And then like what we'll do in turn, we do bring millings to them that they mix with gravel, and we're able to use out of that pile. They use out of that pile. They generally haul sand to us, and we'll mix in our salt for our wintertime mixture. We do share. We keep track of loads and stuff, and we try to balance that out. So we do share materials more than anything, but I have talked with Rick Hartley, who's the current superintendent over there, and we've talked about various things recently of where we could help each other out, and so yes, we've talked about that. What's the next step really? Is do we want to try to see if they'd have time to help us with some of the chip sealing? We have stockpiled chips for the last 2 years that, we'd have a lot of chips there to do a full year of in-house chip sealing, I believe, and be able to keep up. So,
Councilman Villar?
Rob, you want to circle back? The street sweeper was one that you first mentioned as far as definitely a need on your end. And that's by far the biggest expenditure. You want to fill us in again where we are currently and because I know I get a lot of flack out where I live as far as street sweepers not finding their way out there very often. So just kind of fill us in again what you told us a few minutes ago.
Basically, as far as staff, in the spring of the year, I try to put 3 people on sweeping, and it really comes down to the fact that after the winter season, there's so much sand left on the roads from the sand salt mix. It takes about a month for 3 people, a month to 5 weeks, for 3 people to make a full loop through the whole city, just one time. After we've gotten our first loop through the city, then I generally put that 3rd person on patching or other things that we need to do, and we'll go down to 2 people street sweeping. Now, currently we did just receive a new street sweeper, and we're getting rid of our oldest one, which actually has right around 12,000 hours. That's going this summer. But the 06 we have that would be next on the list to replace. You guys maybe don't remember this, but I know a while back I mentioned like they're like old Scorpion snowmobiles. They break down all the time. You have to work on them all the time. They're very high maintenance machines. There's a lot of moving parts, and they wear out fast. But I shouldn't say fast, because getting 12,000 hours out of any heavy equipment is really good, and like 72,000 miles sweeping. So that's like 3 times around the earth, I think, isn't it? But that's a lot of broom cores. But yeah, that 06 has given us a lot of trouble. It's a twin engine machine. We went. The new broom we got is a single engine machine. There's a lot less moving parts, and if we did get another new broom, that's what I would go to. Try to reduce moving parts. So
what's the total? I was only partially listening, and that's my fault. What's the total request that was somebody else totaling up the numbers? Kristen, you're ready to jump in here.
Okay, and that's kind of where I think I wanted Rob to go back to, and just so the council's aware. So if the request is for the one maintenance worker to be added back into the budget, that would be about $58,000. That's with salary and benefits. And then I think where I too would like clarification is, Rob, are you requesting then the complete capital budget, because that's $448,500, or is it the street sweeper?
That's the biggest. That's the biggest thing. I mean, the pickup, the tractor side mower, those type of things. The tractor side mower sprayer, actually we'd be adding a sprayer to it now, instead of before I was requesting just a tractor side mower. But now through talking with our staff member that does the spraying now, he's had some good ideas how we could incorporate that machine to do pretty much what 3 machines would do, really. So, but that we could put off. I mean, I think we're okay putting the sprayer, tractor side mower off. The pickup, yes, we'll get by. The street sweeper, like I say, we're having a lot of issues. Matter of fact, the 06 is out there right now getting worked on 21st Street at the truck shop out there. If it's about every other week we have one of our street sweepers down being worked on, it seems like. So whether it's our staff working on them or a local business working on them. So.
And the generator?
That's kind of a big thing. We do get by. We always make it work, but the generator's $5,500. We do use good Honda generators. I know there's a lot cheaper generators that maybe would get by, but when you rely on them, you really can't beat the Honda. I know we could get by cheaper, but...
Rob, don't we have other departments that have generators for whatever their reserves are, and for the frequency of use, does it make sense that we'd be able to borrow between departments versus each department having their own need, and then it sits there 99% of the time?
And that is a good point. That is something I could look into. We've looked at it like it's handy to have it right there when we need it. We grab it and we go. I understand your point.
What's the frequency on in a year's time? How many times you use it?
Once to twice, really. It's not very often.
Right.
It's just that it's
there.
When 81 and 212 goes down, time is really important. I mean, for a guy to come in, grab the equipment, and run out there, hook it up, and go, that's a big deal, how fast we get it done.
Parks and wastewater probably both have.
I don't know. I can't
Generators.
honestly say, and that's a good point. I mean, if they have the generators, the only thing I would hope is, and this is a lot to ask of another department's generator, but could we keep it at our place? Just because time is really important, how fast we get the lights up and going.
I think it's something to look into.
Yeah.
And to see.
That.
Yep. Any other comments or questions?
So just for my sake, can I get a little bit of direction then from the council? I know we talked about putting it, but do we want everything for capital in? Or are we leaning towards, I'll place in the one employee position and then the street sweeper? Or is it all of it?
My vote was the street sweeper, possibly generator, and then the one employee. What would be my recommendation?
And then removing the tractor and the pickup.
Yeah, Rob, you said you could get by
Yeah.
with.
Yeah. You know, the current tractor that we're replacing, it has 12,000 hours, and it doesn't have a sprayer on it, and it doesn't have the type of arm we're looking at. But we do get by. We borrow. Currently, we borrow wastewater's tractor that's got an arm on it for the spots that we need the extended reach. That's the kind of tractor we'd be buying. They let us borrow that when we need it, which a couple times a year we ask for that. And the tractor we have, like I said, has 12,000 hours, but it does run good. It's an old Ford. It's just really high hours. We've limped it along, so it's hard to find parts for, but we've made it work. So.
Got it?
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Let's move along into snow removal. Rob.
All right. Really, the biggest thing that's changed there, let's see, motor fill and lubricants, same thing I mentioned earlier, is I've asked for an increase of $5,000 for fuel, as I do worry about prices are slowly creeping up, so I like to stay on top of that. My original request for a loader and a blade, the loader thing, we have one loader we're replacing right now. Actually, we'll be looking for council approval on bids here in the September 4th council meeting for a new loader. But we currently have two loaders that are high hours. One's around 11,000, one's just over 10,000 hours, and we are replacing the one right now as we speak. So I had a loader in there and then a blade. Cycling the blades through, it's the same thing. I think we're okay if we don't get a blade this year. It was one request, but I think we can get by another year without a blade, as long as we can still continue to use the landfill's blade with the snow gate. This next winter we shouldn't have a problem there. Loader would still be good. So, and I think the mayor still has us in there for enough to buy the loader, and actually plows and hitches was something that we've been talking about for a few years that I think have gotten put off, but for our trucks. So
what's the net effect of the 250 that's in there? What do you think could come out of that, and then how much does that?
Originally, I had a request for one blade at $300,000 and one loader at $195,000. Now, if we wanted to cut her down to the bare bones, I can get by with $195,000. I won't even need. I could get by without the 250 for
that's built
plows and hitches.
So is the 195, is that a part of that 250?
That is.
Okay, so you're already approved for that within the budget now, right?
But if you need to
He's
pull
saying
some more dollars, you could.
Oh, okay.
If you need to pull some more, you could do it. And
So
we'd-
what's the other
we'd be fine with it.
55,000?
Plows and hitches is something that I've been, we need on our trucks, but it's not like we couldn't get by another year. Our guys we have some decent welders in there, and our guys are doing good keeping those working. And to be honest, we're using truck plows a lot less than we used to because of the snowgate operation. So they're seeing less use, less wear and tear, and we have 2 new plow trucks that we got a couple winters ago, and the guys are using those a lot. So
it would look like we could reduce that 250 down to the 195, still get you your loader.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
And that works. That'll work for us, no problem. We'll make it work.
Maybe that'll bring the rent machinery and equipment down as a result, which would be nice. That's where we pay for the
Right.
I mean, if you've got an extra piece of equipment, that might be a nice little side effect.
And that has been the case of the one loader that we've been limping along for a little while here. We actually put it in our sand dome to load trucks, and we had a note down there that said leave in first gear, because if you run it in second, third, or reverse is okay, but second or third, I mean, it's a $40,000 repair, and we're limping it along. That's the loader we're trading in right now as we speak on the current bid that you guys will look at on September 4th. But we've limped it along, and we have had to hire contractor help with loaders.
Right.
If ours was going, we would be.
The one to be bid is accounted for within 2018, correct?
Yeah, that bid, there's already dollars for that.
Okay, in 2018.
Yep. And this request for 19 would be just another loader that we'd be replacing, one of the high hour. Actually, the loader we'd be replacing next is one we got from the landfill like 3 years or 4 years ago to run a snowblower. That's the one we'd be replacing. That's got like 11,000 hours on it, so she's seen a lot of use. So.
Alrighty.
So, Mayor, sorry. Just to clarify then, we talked about going from the 250 to the 195. What is that what we would like to do then, is to decrease it to the 195? Okay.
You can't pass up that offer.
I know, that's that works for us. We can get by.
Thanks,
it's not a
Rob.
problem.
We do appreciate your pointing that out. So thanks. We're going to take a break, I think, pretty soon, but I'll do the street lights item N. This is what municipal utilities tells us we owe them. It's $552,000 for 2019, which is 2.9% increase over the last year. And I didn't try to argue that down or anything. So I don't know if you want to discuss it. They tell us, we pay it, and it helps them keep our electric rates low in the city. Otherwise, you'd be paying for that with your utility rates. All right. Anybody need a break right now? Should we take one? Take a quick break?
Let's take a
5 minutes. Okay. Take a little break. All right, we'll get back to work here. We're on item O, water resources, and I can handle that one. There was a decrease in the consultant services on that, and other than that, I think it's just the same as what was proposed. Water resources is the department that we take some money for water monitoring and the USGS gauging stations, and our required education and outreach for meeting the Department of Environment and Natural Resource requirements with the Clean Water Act. So any questions about that? Okay, moving right along. Library, item P. Dee Dee?
Thanks for waiting, Dee Dee.
I usually hang around. Good evening, everyone. So I think I'll go ahead and just get started right with the general fund. We'll be talking more about the fines fund in a moment. And it was a little bit of a shock to see no book budget with the cuts to the capital outlay. But before I talk about that, I did change up a few little things in the personnel services. That's why the salary adjustments is a little higher than we would usually see for a department. What I did was kind of rearrange what our part-time folks were doing, how long they were at the library. And then what I really added that is very important to me and to the children of this community is a part-time library aide for our children's librarians so we can reach more kids into the community. And that was an additional cost of like $7,000. So overall, the increase was only about $10,000, which is, I don't think, too terribly large. Other things were just adjustments to actual costs, including the electricity and the water. But to go back to the beginning with the ILS maintenance, we just have an increase, a 5% increase after the first 5 years of using our current ILS. For those of you who don't know, that's integrated library software. That's how we manage all of our collections, all of our patrons, and things like that. Will be having a new staff copier and printer, which was one of our IT requests. And that $1,200 is an estimate to how much the maintenance is going to increase because of that particular item. The good news, though, is that we're still saving money on that. Thanks, Spencer. Overall, in terms of our printing costs. I actually requested that our ebook budget increase by $3,300 because we are having an increase in usage and interest in ebooks. We are having a small decrease in our physical collections, but that's still the vast majority of the items that are circulated here in our community, although I'm really excited about the uptick in ebooks. However, I actually thought that we could maybe offset some of our costs by reducing the ebooks request so we could retain some money for our physical collections.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we actually have been doing a great job saving money on cleaning supplies. And and if you hear all the positive reviews, we get a lot of compliments about how well our maintenance worker does to keep the library clean. So aside from the book budget, one of the things that we were asking for in the capital outlay was what is the term? A fogger. It's an air sanitizing fogger, and it actually cleans and deodorizes the air and surfaces using this thing. It looks like a leaf blower, but it puts out all this sanitizing mist. And as great of a job as Josh does keeping our library clean, we do have a lot of potentially very germy surfaces in our children's area and in our computer lab. So that's one of the items that was on the CIP that I would like to see in the future, but I understand that we are trying to tighten our belts, and so we can do without that. Did anybody have any questions about?
You'd mentioned the book, the hard copy books and such were pulled. What was that dollar amount?
That dollar amount was $100,500. Which was an increase from the 2017 request of $97,500. And so that request was entirely cut, the entire thing. And in a library, it's so important to have current materials. Did you know that Pluto is a dwarf planet? When that happened, it was 10 years ago or more, we had to completely get rid of all of the books that were now inaccurate and then replace them with new books, all of our Pluto books, all of our solar system books. And that's just one part of our collection. And so that's one of the reasons our book budget is so important, that we need to have new and current materials for our patrons so we can continue to provide that access to information in our community. So when I saw the cuts, I was looking, well, what can we do as the library? What can we do to offer something? And we already kind of have a lean budget. In talking with our board, they take a lot of pride in keeping our budget rather lean at the library so we can be efficient and useful in the community. I did look around at some of our line items, and I spent some time with our administrative assistant, Becky, who is she's the budget command general, if you will, over at the library. She knows everything that's been going on with the budget for the past 20 years. And so we looked at some places that we could conserve a little bit. And unfortunately, I was only able to come up with about $18,000 from our operations and maintenance areas. And I can provide those to you. I'm not sure if you've gotten those numbers, but I can send those over if you wanted to review them more tomorrow too, since the meetings were going to continue. So that was the thoughts that I had, is that we could probably, hopefully, save that in O&M and move that towards the capital. And if we asked about $100,000, so that's only 18% of our budget. So if there's anything you all can throw away, we need to be able to maintain our collections and serve our patrons with new materials.
So rather than getting $100,000 worth of new materials, what would you say is critically important? Like, that's a bunch of different categories.
Yes.
I mean, you got children's in there, and I don't know how you categorize everything, but what would you see as a bare minimum that you need to just operate?
Do you mean dollar amount or
yes.
collections? I would say 50,000 would be very bare bones for us. And if I could come up with, like I said, some of the savings, I would happy to share with you. Even some of those cuts are a little bit precarious, if you will. There are a couple of line items in our budget that we actually request funds for, but we don't use because the state is actually paying for those particular items. And sometimes those have been on the chopping block at the state level. So if they were cut on the state level, then that's something that we would have to pick up the tab again for. And I'll give a good example is our 42222, the courier services. We budgeted about $2,300 for them. And you can look over the past few budget years and see that money has not been used. And it's because it was only a potential cut at the state level. And so those services are actually used for our interlibrary loan around the state. So, and we do maybe 3,000-ish interlibrary loans, if my memory is serving me correctly. So that's an area that I thought, well, maybe we could borrow a little bit from them if we're having a rainy day here. But it does potentially, it could potentially be an expense in the future. The state, I'm sure, is trying to do the same thing that we are here in Watertown. Everybody wants to conserve as much as they can and spend as wisely as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, and I didn't want to cut everything out of the library. What I wanted to do, though, is to have you tell us, frankly, what you cannot do just cannot function. Our community can't go on. I cut virtually everyone's capital outlay, and it's painful to do that. I lost sleep over it. I guarantee you that wasn't easy for me to do. And we're still in the red. Now, I do think, like we talked before, we have been very loosely budgeting. We almost always come in with more revenue than we project, and we almost always come in with less expenditure than we budget, so we don't actually end up going in the hole like it looks. And there's a little bit of room there, but I need help figuring out how to balance that, and this is my cry for help from the council. Yes.
You know, the one issue with this is I think it should go on our list for further consideration when we get to the end, and somewhere between a $50,000 and $100,000, because books is your business. That's your product.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
It really is.
that's like trying to run the driving range without golf balls.
And we, like I said, we could bare bones get by with $50,000, but that's still going to be painful. It's still going to be a lot of materials that we're not going to be able to provide. And this has happened before in terms of losing our book budget, and we've had to work for a few years to get it back up to where it had been before. I think it was in 2009 our book budget was $108,000, and then the next year it was zeroed out to nothing. And then we used some money from our fines fund, which we're just about to talk about, to help have any money for materials that year. The 3 years after that, there was $50,000 budgeted for materials the subsequent years. And following that, I'm losing track, sorry. It was $100,000 that was used from the fines fund. At that point, the fines fund had more cash in it than it does now. And so this would be if there may be some money used from the fines fund for the book budget, it would be the third time in less than 10 years that it had been used in that manner. So just to keep that in mind in terms of the sustainability of that particular fund as well. So.
Dee Dee, sorry, Mayor, if I might. What would be the actual ramifications if we did cut that to say $50,000, and then we were able to increase that number next year? What would happen as a result of that? With memberships drop? I mean, what would happen?
Well, it's possible. I think that there are probably some ramifications we're facing today from cuts from previous years. I did a little bit of math, and had the cuts not occurred and we continued on the path that we were at approximately a 3% increase each year, that's led to about $500,000 not being spent on library funds, on library materials. And that's a lot of materials. It is over 9 years, though. It's not a new street sweeper or anything like that, but it does make a difference in terms of the collections that we can offer people and the information that people can access. And it's a little more difficult to quantify because it's more of a question of when patrons go to the library and they're looking for a particular resource and it's not there, do they come back to the library? It's hard for us to know who we've lost by not having the resources that people need to access at that time.
Other comments or questions?
Well, did you ask me how much?
Yeah, I would like to know how much of the council I know what we talked about, everything we've discussed, we will put in and then kind of review again.
Well,
the request was $100,500. Actual in 16 was 93,000 and 17 was 92,000. I'm just trying to give you kind of a idea in the last couple of years, the actuals. So,
I think we put the bare bones in, but we put a little asterisk by that for our conversation that would go back to their request amount and see where we're at with the difference.
Okay.
And for the discussion with hopefully what will be a full council. That would be my recommendation, just see where we're at.
I agree with that, so we can prioritize.
So the 50,000. Okay.
Councilman Vilhar.
I'm not opposed to that. I guess before we do that, I'd like to segue into the library's fines fund and talk about that, and then maybe circle back with what our recommendation might be.
Okay.
Sure, let's leap into fines fund. And there haven't been a lot of significant changes to the fines fund, with the big exception of technology expenses. And Spencer and I met about this before going to the library board for their approval. And do you want to talk more about it, or should I kind of just?
Do you want me as more support? Or?
Sure, Spencer. Thank you. The first item is replacing 8 of the security cameras. There are approximately 30 something, and 16 of them are analog.
I'll take over.
Thanks, Spencer. I'm not good with the cameras. The other stuff I know better, but not the cameras.
All right, so the cameras, we have 16 analog. They have, I want to say, in the 40 range cameras in the library. So it's I think the biggest. I think they're bigger than the wellness center as far as security cameras go. We're trying to get rid of the analog cameras. They're dropping like flies. So this is to replace 8 of those 16. It's something that I think we have ongoing in the long-term budget to just try to keep ahead of those because they do go bad. The next line is to replace all of the public computers. That includes the catalog machines as well as the lab computers. And what's the other ones? No, that's it.
Oh, get some YA computers in our YA area.
What's that?
That's adding some young adult computers.
Young adult. So we're adding a few more lab computers in the young adult area. A pretty budget-friendly computer, but what we're finding is from an IT standpoint, they were gifted to us from Lake Area Tech after 5 to 7 years of life there, and just trying to keep the lab up and running is a constant battle, and we get bad comments about library computers frequently. So that was kind of the angle there, is let's finally get some decent computers in there for the public to use. I'm guessing that's probably the big item for you guys, but the 3 staff computer, just as part of our rotation, the copier, it looks like is going to have to be replaced this year, so that will probably not get spent next year because we're going to have to replace it in 2018, correct?
Yes.
And then the EnvisionWare software is the ability to be able for patrons to print off of a mobile device. Currently, it's pretty difficult to do, and it only works about not very often. So this gets an app on a phone, so you can actually print and then pay for your prints at the kiosk there. And when we replaced their computers this year, we ran into major problems with receipt printers. They use a serial type connection, and new computers are not coming with serial connections anymore. They're coming with USB in place of that. So we had to do a workaround that is kind of working.
Ish.
Is that just an adapter? I'm sorry, pardon.
By the way, Mike, my metaphor was a scuba shop. It doesn't have any air in terms of not having bugs. But a couple quick questions. 40 cameras, is that because people are swiping books, or is it a liability security issue, personnel? That's a lot of cameras.
It is. My understanding was that the layout of the library, correct?
Oh,
sorry. Yes,
nooks and crannies.
Yeah, the layout of the library, lots of nooks and crannies, and I think there's been some incidents at the library, everything from graffiti a few years back to,
all right. That's
smaller,
what I thought.
Yeah.
Second question then is on the public computers. Last night I had a conversation on this. It's been some time, but they were getting a lot of use. What is usage on that? The few times, and I don't go to the library that much, but I've gone the few times, and those computers were getting used a lot. What's the latest?
I have those numbers right here because I don't know about y'all, but I can't remember most things. That's why I have references. Well, we actually, while I'm trying to find that number for you, last September, when the filter was installed, is when we were able to get better data on the usage in the lab, and it was counted at like 32,000 uses last year. That might be a little high, but so far this year it's more like, let's see if I can do some math here, about 9,000 for half the year. So still being used pretty well. And especially in the summer right now where we are full fairly frequently.
Councilman Danforth?
So, Spencer, if the printer, or the copier, I should say, is coming out of 2019 and going to be done in 2018, are you covered for 2018 within the budget?
It will be over budget for that particular budget line, but we do have savings elsewhere that we can use for that particular.
Elsewhere, so you're covered budget-wise. So that $6,500 could come off, and if needed, could go towards the book purchase. Then, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What's the balance? If you what's current balance, and what would your projected balance be with this budget of the fines fund?
The current balance is $283,000 and some odd cents. So if we are spending roughly 70, that would put us around 210. And then if we have we've projected our revenue to be slightly lower than in previous years. So we're projecting our revenue to be about $30,000. So after a $70,000 expense, which this fund has typically been spending right around income over the past 5 years or so, around $40,000 in income and revenue and $40,000 expenditures. So that would put the fund is still around $240,000 if we continue this spending of about $70,000, primarily on technology. If there's an amount that would need to be allocated towards our book budget, that's something that the library board would have to approve.
Okay. Councilman Villar?
I guess I was going along those same lines because I went back and looked at the CAFR for the end of 2017, and your numbers makes sense as far as where you're at currently with that fund balance, Dee Dee. Are there some restrictions as to what that, I know I've asked this question before, Mike or Bruce, I think you've got more of a history. Are there some restrictions as to what that can be used for under South Dakota law?
I'm trying to find that right now. I don't, I haven't found anything yet.
I mean, I guess, too, I'd like to see us replace more than $100,000 that we're cutting out of the general fund. And, well, there's a combination of the library fund or the library fines fund, get you a good chunk of that back if you're willing to dip into that library's fine fund. And grant you're going to draw that fund balance down some more. But to me, that would be a viable option, at least in my thinking, unless there's some restriction or strong need to keep that fund balance roughly where it's at.
I don't think that there's a need to keep it exactly at this amount. I think that there could be some of that fund used. It would just have to be determined by the library board. And we do have a policy in place, so not necessarily state statute, but I have it right here. Monies in the fines fund may be used for, but are not limited to, the purchase and maintenance of computing and networking, equipment and software, maintenance of photocopiers, adult, teen, and children's programming, and then at the very end, there's a few more. Purchase of physical materials for circulation. So.
Where did you see that?
Possibility.
Where did you see
that? This
that?
is actually on our website under the library's policies. This is the fines fund policy.
So that was adopted July 2nd, 2014. That was adopted by the library board?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and I did find an official Attorney General's opinion that just says that the fines fund can be used to may retain and use those funds for library purposes in excess of the funds generated through tax levy. So essentially, anything. Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. Are we circling back?
So I think then probably because Dee Dee, when is the next time that the library board would meet?
The library board's regular meeting would be the 4th of September, I believe. But in speaking with the board about this matter, they would be willing to have a special meeting to discuss potential allocation of fines fund monies.
Okay. So I guess I can ask Matt and Dee Dee this. Is it appropriate for the council to kind of put forth their recommendation for you to bring back to the board? So it's in the budget, whether we want to have the general fund doing the 50,000 and whatever we deem appropriate, maybe for the fines.
Can I just make a suggestion? First of all, the fines fund is allowed by state statute. We all know that. And I do believe that what we've done is we had, way back when I sat on as the liaison to that, we established a cap on that because a lot of the income was well beyond what the scope was for its intent, the fines fund. Which I think overall that was a good thing, and we've gotten, I think, good support from the library and the board there. My recommendation would be this, is that for our discussions purposes today, we go with the $50,000 to get looked back at this. You've got $6,500 that you would plan to spend that won't. I would go back to your board and see about what amounts you guys are what your total amount really needs to be. It went from 92, you said? 92 to about 92 to 100 or actual. Yeah. See what your actual amount is and what if they'd be willing to cover anything above the 50,000. Doesn't mean that the balance of the council won't go any farther, but that would be my recommendation because we do have to ultimately have to have an approval made in a timely manner. So that would be my recommendation.
So you're saying that the 50,000 restored to the general fund library balance? I mean, come out of the general fund. Okay.
For consideration.
Dee Dee, how much can come out of the fines fund? I mean, what?
That would depend on what the library board is comfortable with as well. I don't, there's nothing that I know of that would say, a minimum or maximum amount to be in the fines fund. It is capped if it's 35% of our overall spending, which let's just say it's $1 million. It's close to that. It's not quite. That would be $350,000 would be the cap.
That'd be the maximum.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
For the fines fund, yes.
Sounds good. Any other comments? Kristen, are you clear? Okay. All right. Thank you, Dee Dee.
Yeah, thank you all. Have a good evening.
Next is Q, Building Services. Ken Buchholz.
They turned it off on me, huh? Personnel services went up 15,000. That's just whatever they accumulated for. Our nuisance abatement costs we dropped from 10,000 down to 5,000. It's just been something that's on the books that we've hardly ever used. All the rest of my stuff is basically we just took a 5% increase across the board, and that's pretty much what it is.
I didn't really cut anything. So anybody have any? You had no capital outlay to cut?
Nope.
Otherwise, I probably would have. Glenn?
Is the 2017, I'm looking at the revenue side again, we're looking at quite a drop. Was that the hospital project that skewed the 2017 revenue number?
No, generally when we have a drop in revenue, what skews it is whenever we have a public project like the rec center or something like that. It's on the books for what we did, but we don't collect any revenue off it. Okay. So it'd been the school or the rec center, those things. We actually got paid for the hospital.
Well, that's my point, and we would have been paid for that in 2017, I'm guessing. So that's reflected in the 2017 number, I'm guessing.
I would say yes.
It actually was in both years, believe it or not, because they had extended permit, and I think they re-upped for another $4 million or something. So we collected a little bit of that in 17 and 18 because they didn't get the job done and complete in 1 year.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All All right, Ken. Thank you. It was a long wait for a short.
I did most of my waiting at home.
Okay. Okay, the next item is R, general fund transfers, and I'll discuss this one. The transfer out to Park and Rec has been steady, kept that the same. The airport transfer went down 100,000 from 2018, and let's see, everything else. Oh, the request for the Big Sioux project was 80,000, and I put 50 back, which is what we've been doing, and it didn't look like that was going to cripple that project, and Roger's coming up to talk about that in a little bit. Any questions about those? The total transfers is $2 million.
Mayor, on the event center, I'm trying to think back at this when we went through this with Minerva's and such, but is that lease up?
No, it's not.
Is it still, the current agreement is in place with them?
Yes.
Okay. Were there items that they were supposed to have done or completed that have all been completed? John, I remember way back, gosh, it's been about 4 years ago maybe now, we were talking.
What do you mean by items?
There were items that were considered or were addressed at some of our meetings with the ownership about things that needed to get done on their part or get looked at.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I think it was more us than them.
No, there were some of theirs as well.
You mean like as in giving us their budget and that kind of stuff?
No, I can't remember exactly what the meeting was. I know we had some action items coming out of there on both sides. And I don't recall exactly what it was. But the current agreement is still in place. It hasn't.
Yes, it's still in place.
Okay. All right.
Mike, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Point of order, Mr. Roby. I think that was there a cost share on one of those items?
I can't remember what it was. There's something there.
Well, I know we looked at HVAC.
Yeah.
Sorry, point of
Tell
order,
me
Mr.
what it
Bueller
is.
as well.
Tell me
I don't know what it is,
is.
but some of the things that we looked at were the HVAC system, the kitchen equipment.
Okay, well,
Those kinds of things. Yeah.
We took over their obligations. They agreed to provide the maintenance on those items, and it got really expensive, and the city renegotiated and did an addendum to the lease. Is that what you mean? Maybe that's what you mean.
That's what I recall.
that
And Don, you were
so
involved
now
with
we're
that.
responsible for a lot of the expenses that they had originally agreed.
Some of those, yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. Because that's basically all that addendum did was have the city take on a bunch of the responsibilities that the event center was originally obligated to perform. So.
That's right.
Yeah. And Kristen, you have to remind me on that event center. I think we did pick that up somewhere else.
We didn't pick it up anywhere. It's just with how the BBB fund is looking at this point with the tax revenues coming in. The event center actually sits under that as far as their expenses for the maintenance and stuff. So we feel as though the transfer was not necessary because of the revenue and expenditures, how they're sitting in the BBB fund.
Yep. Okay.
That's a good move.
Yeah.
That's the right
Well,
move.
and that's what the BBB fund is for. Precisely that. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Item S is the Urban Renewal Fund, and I know Kristen's been visiting with the Urban Renewal Board, and there is no requested budget. So yeah, you go ahead and explain that.
Okay, this as far as what we're looking at with the Urban Renewal Board, you will see no budgeted revenues and no budgeted expenditures. The Urban Renewal Board did meet, I think it was last week, and they have proposed that the assessment come forward. So the council will be, I think the notice of public hearings will be going out shortly, And that will again be coming back to the full council for the assessment tax. That's where we hold the public hearings. And at that point, if it gets approved by the council to have the tax assessment, that would put the revenue into the budget for 2019. I did speak with Vanessa and asked how I should handle the expenditure side of the budget for 2019. Either way, how the tax would go. And it sounds like, of course, if the tax is not approved, the assessment is not approved, then there will be no budget. It is my understanding from the Urban Renewal Board, their stance is if the tax is imposed, they would still not want a budget for 19. Their plan is to kind of hold that cash for a while to create kind of a balance for some of the projects that they want to do. They have some street projects in mind, as well as there's discussion for the board to look at a coordinator position. And those are just some of the things that I was going to relay to the council.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments? Councilman Vilhauer?
It probably isn't fair to ask you, Kristen, but I remember the conversation a year ago when this came forward. What didn't generate a whole lot of interest because of the comment was, well, what's the plan? There's no plan for that. I mean, is there a plan going to be brought forth? Or are we going to go down the same road again and with the same result?
I believe that the Urban Renewal Board has been discussing more of the plan, and I think the plan is to build that fund for those, like the streetscaping projects and stuff like that, as well as I think they feel strongly about a coordinator position. And I think that's where their plan is.
Councilman Bueller?
Are they looking at a part-time coordinator position like we used to have?
That I do not know. I could ask Vanessa that question.
Yeah, I'm gonna, if I can, Mayor, I'm gonna tag on what Glenn was saying, because they were very strong that I don't want to be taxed for and not know where my dollars are going. And so we're going to have a clear understanding when that comes to council. They should know where they're at with their membership, so that we know
and
where
we
we
would
sit
have,
and that we're not just dealing with a board.
We would have the opportunity that will come before the council the first meeting in September, the public hearing of the assessment. So we do have the meeting next week. I could request, if that's something you would like, to have Vanessa with the Urban Renewal Board discuss if there have been talks of the plan for the board, or if there's something else you would like me to.
Well, here's what I would like to see. They need to sell this to their membership, the Urban Renewal people. I would like to see a full audit or response from them. They need to communicate to their membership what their plan is. I think they need to get a yay or nay from their plan, that we should know who all those members are and whether they support or not support the reenactment of this.
I'm sure they will fill the council chamber at the public hearing. And I don't think that the Urban Renewal Board was chomping at the bit to implement the tax. They didn't instigate that. It's a question that needs to be asked, and the council is the only one that can do that. The Urban Renewal Board doesn't do that. That comes from the council.
No, I understand. But they are the body that can go find out what the position is of the Urban Renewal members.
Right, and they did, for a group of volunteers, they've worked quite hard to keep the streetscape project going, and they had that drawn up. We've got some pretty cool ideas and renderings of what downtown could look like with a park and a band shell, open area, along with bump outs and various features in the roadway. So the elements are there for a plan, and maybe it's not formulated to the point that it's presented. They're probably going to need some help in doing that, being that those are all people with jobs and lives. outside of being on the urban renewal board, and it's a part of our downtown. I mean, it's a part of our community downtown. Maybe we can help them with that. So a little bit of, if any of the council members are interested in providing some assistance, I'm sure you won't be turned down helping them put something together. And I don't want them to be crucified over the tax coming up for a public hearing. There has been a lot of excitement generated over the renderings that were done for what downtown could look like. And those things aren't going to be free. And, we aren't going to be able to pay for them in 1 year. So having the tax would enable them to have a fund to draw from to fund part of it anyway, or to do a coordinator, that sort of thing. So any other questions or comments? Matt?
I was just going to chime in that I did attend the last meeting, and the coordinator aspect was discussed simply because of the fact that there's been so much talk over the years about doing something for downtown. And you look at some of these past vision plans that always include revitalizing downtown, and things just come and go. And the idea is that, well, without a paid position,
Right.
the ideas just die.
Right.
Things just kind of fall away because it's nobody's job to make sure
Right.
things continue. And so I think that they seem to think that would be a key aspect of what they could do going forward.
I agree with that. Well, you look at the park board, they don't do the work of, they've got a whole staff that does. And it's an important board. It's an important part of our community. The library board, they don't do the work. They have a staff that does the work. Municipal Utilities Board, they have a whole department of staff that does the work. And the board comes, meets, talks, and leaves. The Urban Renewal Board has gone way above and beyond that in production of the downtown streetscape. And, all the flowers, the speakers, those people have put in a ton of time, not just sitting at a table, pounding pavement and actually doing physical work, going places, seeking out quotes. It's way more than most board members do. They don't just come, sit down, talk, and leave. And, they're collecting the same zero paycheck as all the other board members. So I think that a little support from the community would be helpful. I think they do need to get a coordinator. So, did you want to say something?
I do.
Bueller?
I do recall because some years back I was on the Urban Renewal Board when I started as a council person. We did have a part-time coordinator at that time, and in my opinion, it was very successful. And I was kind of disappointed that they strayed away from that. I do, however, believe that a part-time person would be sufficient to kind of keep that ball rolling. Because I agree with you, Mayor. You're right. These other departments all have staffs that work and make sure all these things get done and prioritize and all those kind of things. So to me, I think, in my opinion, that would be a good route for us to go if we can.
Yep. Thank you. Anyone else? Right. Very good. Item T is Upper Big Sioux Watershed Project. Roger.
Gets lonely out there in the crowd. To get things started, yes, we did request an additional $20,000 this year. But after talking to the mayor and the finance department, I'm okay with not receiving that. We were going to use it for personnel services and additional water monitoring, information education type programs. One thing I would like to point out, and it's totally my fault, that our expenses and our revenues do not match in the budget book. I've made the changes. I've massaged my numbers to make those numbers match at the $288,000. It would be great to do additional work. However, we can bare bones it this year. I will be coming before you again in the next month to request permission to extend our grant through the DNR and ask them for additional funds for the next 3-year segment. We're kind of at that weird end of grant cycle right now where the EPA money has piled up. We're going to ask to extend that to be able to spend that EPA money a little more efficiently. And this is kind of how everything rolls together at the end of the cycle.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Roger? Councilman Villar?
I just want to clarify, Roger, what you said. So the 300,000, the $300,270 that we're seeing, you're saying really should be $288,000?
That is correct.
Okay.
The adjustments I've made, well, we've had this other supplies fund, and no one has really been super sure about where that comes from. I've cut that down to bare minimums, paper for the copy machine, that kind of stuff. I have cut back on our information education fund from 2,000 to 1,000. We'll spend less. We're doing more work with the zoo and reaching students and doing educational second graders, third graders. Let me tell you, that's a lot of fun. Wink, wink. But we'll be working more with other programs that are going on versus trying to do standalone things and reduce the cost that way. The phosphorus facility, our utility bills to keep that building up and running has only been, if I'm looking at the right numbers, about $3,000 a year. And so I've cut that down to $3,000 for the coming year. And that's just to keep a couple of pumps running, the power on. I need to take water levels on a weekly basis and daily when we have events. So we need to keep the thing from flooding out and to keep it from falling in. And other than that, it all kind of massages out to that $288,000.
All right.
And I would like to point out that the Upper Big Sioux, it does have a little bit of a fund balance too that it sits on. So even with the budget as it was, there was around 40,000. So.
All right. Any questions? Thank you, Roger.
If I'm ever to name another project, it's not going to start with the letter U. I think a river project or something would be more appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, the next item, U, is BBB Sales Tax Fund. Kristen, you want to take this one?
I could start, and then we'll see kind of where we go. There's a couple of things that I think need discussion. As far as the general government, if you look at if you actually turn to page 93, that's actually the sheet that I like to kind of look at. The general government portion is the event center. That is what we budget for our equipment maintenance and the utilities of the event center. So just so we kind of can break it down a little bit. The one item, the city promotion, we currently don't have a budget in there, and I think that's something that the council needs to be aware of. What was in there in the past was retail strategies as well as Ryan's queries budget. We have nothing in there, so that would be an item if the council wants to add something in there. The next line is the CVB budget. That did see a slight increase. It is not what the CVB was requesting. Their request was quite a bit higher, but this is what the you can see the 318 to the 284. Other than that, the biggest change, of course, is that the Boys and Girls Club subsidy has moved to the general fund. And then I did talk earlier about how we increased the transfer to the Park and Rec. It went from 50,000 in the past to 400,000. So other than that, if there's kind of questions or if you guys want to have a discussion.
Yeah, and I know we already talked about this a little bit. I think it's really important that this fund be used as it was intended for our event center and for our park and rec facilities, and we also do all the other promotion and so on to it. You know, quite a bit of that money goes to promotion. Any questions? No? Okay, we'll move on. Item V is the Casualty Reserve Fund, and I bet Kristen wants to do that one.
Yeah, and Casualty Reserve Fund, this is a fund that is set aside. This would be any type of small repairs on any of our equipment, property, that we don't want to cover through insurance. Say it's so minor that the deductible is high. You know, we have those where it's, and you could see throughout the years, I mean, $8,400 was in 16, and we didn't spend anything in 17. So this is really for those minor expenses that kind of come out of here when it isn't covered by insurance.
Okay, any questions? All right, we'll move on to the general obligation bonds. I'll let Kristen do that one too.
Okay, these are the debt service fund that was established for the GO bonds. This one too is one where it's the tax that we collect through property taxes, and we basically are set up the tax so that it covers the debt service payments for those bonds. So the debt service expenditures for 2019 are budgeted at $501,000. So it's another one of those kind of straightforward funds.
Okay. Any questions? Councilman Villar?
How does that work, Chris, when we get to the end here in a few years? If there's a little bit of a balance, I mean, if there's some cash left, I mean, how does that zero itself out at the end of this? Does my question make sense?
It does make sense. I will probably have to look into that. I would assume that it is similar to how we handle like our TIFs and stuff. Anything that is collected kind of over the necessary is actually given back, and then it's kind of spread out. I will look into that. The one thing that we'll be pretty close on, though, is as we get closer, it is one thing that we know exactly. The only thing that really changes is if we have any type of, it's more like the agent charges. But I know going straight forward what the principal and interest payment is. So as we kind of get closer, we should be able to get pretty exact on it. Yep.
Great. TIFs, item X. Kristen?
I can go over these one by one, or I can just give okay, yep. So before you are all the TIF funds. The only thing that I will point out is TIF number 3 does not exist. That was our one that was paid off. And so that's what we like to see. Otherwise, other than that, TIF 1 is sitting very well. TIF 2 is it's doing okay. It seems to be holding kind of steady. 5 is the one where we're hoping to see some of the growth. That's the one where we definitely have a higher debt service, and we just haven't seen the properties go in there to kind of take in that revenue. And 6 is also doing well. So we just continue to hope for the growth in those areas. Other than that, I didn't have anything else.
All right, any questions or comments? All right, is there any old business? Any new business? Any liaison member reports? We have no need to go into executive session pursuant to SDCL 1-25-2, and so I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councilman Bueller, second by Councilman Danforth. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. I just realized we don't have a quorum. We are adjourned.
We did. It was fun, though. I mean,